lights different?
Don't we normally have these on?
We had our monthly meeting today at 4, so.
Oh, you and Desmond?
Yeah.
So did you two?
The board meeting will begin in 30 seconds. The meeting will begin in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening. The regular school board meeting for May 10, 2016 is now in session. Pam, roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Present.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mrs. Henderson?
Here.
Mrs. Nisi?
Here.
And Mr. Ziegler.
Here. Michelle Irwin, Director of Community Relations, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this point, board members will do some recognitions. I'd like to myself start out by recognizing in the audience we have with us our state attorney, Phil Archer. And I believe we're expecting our sheriff. Is Mr. Ivy coming? We don't know. Okay, well, when he comes here, we'll make sure he's well recognized. Any other board members have any shout-outs or recognitions tonight? No? Wow, it's going to be a great, nice, fast meeting. Okay, and that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Blackburn?
Mr. Ziegler and members of the board, on tonight's agenda, we have 2 recognition items, 2 presentations, 23 consent items, 2 action items, 11 information items, 1 board discussion point, and 1 superintendent discussion item. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. There is a revision to item A5 on administrative staff recommendations, a revision to the presentation on TNTP Insight survey results, a consent addition, item F19 on the reappointment nominations of continuing and professional service contract teachers for 2016-2017 school year, 3 consent revisions, item F11 on approval of minutes, item F12 on student expulsions, and item F16 on instructional staff recommendations. Additionally, there is a superintendent discussion item on the ERP audit.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Nisi, second by Mrs. Henderson. Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion, please vote. I have no reply. Well, let's quick do a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. I don't know, it allowed me to vote. Well, gotta love technology. All right, Dr. Blackburn, let's move on to administrative staff recommendations.
Under item A5, you have 2 administrative staff recommendations to consider.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Belford, second by Mrs. Nisi. Any discussion? Not hearing discussion, please vote. Let's hope this works. Probably not. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, came up 5-0, either way, same vote. Imagine that. All right, Dr. Blackburn.
Before we go further, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the administrative staff members present this evening. With us this evening is Jane Respis, Director of Professional Learning and Development. Ms. Respis is leaving us to take a position in Osceola County. We will miss her and wish her all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Yes, I'm moving over to Osceola County. I'm going to be the Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. I start June 1st. I love Brevard County. In August, I will have been here 29 years, so you guys have taught me everything I know, and love it. I'm still going to live here. My children have gone here. My one child still goes here, so I will miss you all.
Next, I would like to congratulate Jacqueline Ingrata on her reclassification and transfer from the position of Coordinator of Staff Development to the position of Principal, Edgewood Junior Senior High School.
Thank you, board members and Dr. Blackburn. I'd also like to thank Dr. Reinhardt, Dr. Mullins, Mrs. Klein. I can go on and on, Dr. Respis, Mr. Fleming, Dr. Nguyen, all my colleagues that have helped me get this far, and my family, my husband who's in Alabama for work, and our 3 beautiful children. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this next journey, and I'm honored to serve the Edgewood community. So thank you.
Hey, Dr. Blackburn, ready to begin the recognition portion of this evening's meeting?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ziegler and members of the board, item B6 is our Spotlight on Education segment, which shares many of the exciting, innovative, and excellent programs, activities, and projects happening in our schools. Featured this evening is Madison Middle School, whose presentation will highlight the school's implementation of the Sources of Strength program. Sources of Strength are a research-based suicide prevention program designed to harness the power of peer networks to change unhealthy norms and culture. The program advocates peer leaders, connectivity to adult advisors to talk about the real problems youth face, with a goal of creating positive conversations about seeking help in a time of need. Please welcome Madison Middle Principal Sherry Tomlinson, School Counselor and Sources of Strength sponsor Chandra English, and 2 representatives from the Children's Center Manager, Lori Duster and Kathy Simonson, Special Programs Coordinator.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. We also have with us this evening Debbie Settle, who's the Program Manager at Children's Center, so we're most appreciative that all 3 of them are here this evening. Good evening, school board members, Dr. Blackburn, district leadership, and community members. Madison is honored and excited to be with you this evening. We've put together a video for you to enjoy, introducing you to our sources of strength.
Hello, I'm Sherry Tomlinson, the proud principal of James Madison Middle School in Titusville. In the fall of this school year, through the generosity of Jess Parish Medical Foundation, and under the leadership of Lori Duster and Kathy Simonson from the Children's Center, James Madison Middle School was afforded the opportunity to implement a research-based best practice suicide prevention program called Sources of Strength. Special thanks to Dr. Reinhardt also.
The initial Sources of Strength pilot began in North Dakota in 1998 with the development of the Sources of Strength wheel. This wheel provides an effective way to motivate Sources of Strength students, called peer leaders, to clearly understand supports they can have access to in order to help their peers turn to them when needed. These 8 support areas are family support, positive friends, mentors, healthy activities, generosity, spirituality, medical access, and mental health. At the beginning of our implementation, students wrote their source of strength on a leaf, creating our Sources of Strength tree. This has become a vital place to go for ideas from their peers. Sources of Strength has a mission to spread hope, help, and strength into our community, seeking to harness the power of social networks to change unhealthy norms, thus reaching far beyond simply suicide prevention. Madison joined with our feeder school, Astronaut High School, to become the first schools in Florida to implement Sources of Strength. And there's funding now available to extend to the other North Area secondary schools next year, thanks again to the generosity of Jess Parish Medical Foundation. We are proud of what's happening with Sources of Strength on our campus and how it's impacting. We hope that now you sit back and enjoy a little bit about Madison Middle School Sources of Strength.
To think this all started with a tree that gave life to a unique program aimed at reducing the likelihood of one student doing the unthinkable, committing suicide. This tree has become a symbol of what Sources of Strength means to our students, faculty, and staff at Madison Middle School.
We have a diverse group of adult advisors from all parts of our staff that have embraced their roles of supporters to our peer leaders. These individuals were chosen by the student body, which makes the role all more meaningful to them. The adult advisors are grouped for planning purposes and are responsible for conducting each Sources of Strength protective factor meetings. Each meeting focuses on a different strength and developing the ability to rely on that strength to cope with difficult times in life. Our adult advisors cherish the positive relationships created as a direct result of having Sources of Strength on our campus.
Peer leaders were chosen based on several factors, but their ability to both represent and reach the diverse population at our school was of the utmost importance. These students participate in several meetings and activities throughout the year that increase their knowledge of the protective factors and how to spot areas of concern amongst their classmates. For example, during the meeting about the strength of positive friends, students explore what positive friends look and act like, and they learn how they can draw strength from interactions with them, especially during difficult or emotional times.
Sources of Strength's impact is to reach other areas of our school. In conjunction with PBIS, Sources of Strength has helped us to decrease the amount of discipline referrals. We believe that our students are using the protective factors to help them search out support that will keep them from displaying behaviors that lead to disciplinary action. This has also led to faculty and staff writing more positive behavior referrals. These referrals are used to identify students for the good that they do each day. This promotes several of the protective factors that these students desperately need and desire.
It is our hope that through the continued efforts of Sources of Strength support staff, our adult advisors, and our remarkable peer leaders, that Madison Middle School becomes a beacon of light for students beginning the most difficult yet exciting times of their lives.
Doing Sources of Strength, it helped me learn more about generosity and helping other kids and just lifting them up when they're down.
I think that Sources of Strength has had an impact on my life. Part of the wheel was family and friends, and I thought that was really important to learn about because I didn't realize how much more I have than some people in the world.
Sources of Strength has helped me reach out to new students and see things through a different perspective.
My favorite part about Sources of Strength is that all the teachers part of it were great mentors.
We are a group of diverse students and adults from many different corners and cultures of our school and community.
We believe that life has ups and downs. All of us will go through good times and tough times.
Our mission is to ensure that during the rough times, no one gets so overwhelmed or hopeless that they want to give up.
Our mission is to spread hope, help, and strength into every corner of our community.
Our mission is to help students and staff turn to their strengths and their supports that are all around.
We are connectors to help and strength.
Our mission recognizes that our voice has great power and we use it to break the silence when someone is struggling.
We spread hope by focusing on stories of strength rather than stories of trauma. We know that our most powerful impact comes from the personal actions, conversations, messages that use our music, our art.
Our activities, our social media,
our culture, and our voice.
This gives life to our efforts. We are
Sources of Strength.
The heart and soul of our Sources of Strength has been our school counselor, Chandra English, and it's come with the dedication and hard work of so many of Madison's staff and community, and especially our students. And so those who are here this evening to support Sources of Strength, could you please stand and be recognized? We appreciate your support, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, I don't particularly have any questions, but I think your presentation is very timely because it seems to be a very hot topic right now about how to make sure all students feel supported and loved, and clearly we know that peer support is probably the best solution to what's in front of us right now, so thank you very much for making that happen at Madison.
Thank you.
Before we continue, I'd like to introduce our guest, Mr. Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Thank you for joining us tonight. Although he's part of the next presentation, Dr. Blackburn, go ahead.
Item B7 is to present the annual Drug-Free Poster Contest Awards. Ms. Bridget Geiger, our K-12 Visual Arts and Theater Resource Teacher, will make the introductions.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. School board members and guests in attendance tonight, it's my pleasure to be here this evening as we recognize three very talented young artists for their creative planner cover designs illustrating the importance of drug-free messages for their peers. Please welcome Brevard County State Attorney Phil Archer and Sheriff Wayne Ivey, who will give you a brief overview of the program and present the awards.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you for your help in putting this together and making this another successful year in what we do. And thank you to all the art teachers that are really the key component in this contest, because without their drive, without them arranging it and getting these students to participate, it wouldn't happen. And of course, thank you to all the students. You know I speak for the sheriff in saying we are so happy to participate in these kind of programs. We unfortunately deal every day with young people that make bad choices, and some really bad choices. And so when you see the winners that we're about to present today, and you see the video with the young people, I truthfully believe that our students today are more environmentally conscious, more socially conscious, more community aware than any students ever before. And it's a credit to the parents that are here and to the teachers. Thank you all for making this a great school system and a great place. It just makes you feel great when you can do these programs. We started this drug-free calendar contest in 1991. Norm Wolfinger, who started this. And his idea was, we need to get the message out about drugs, being against drugs. And he knew that you had to have the right message, but you had to have the right messengers. And it really didn't matter if the adults were telling kids what to think or believe, but you really needed the kids to carry that message. And so they started this calendar contest in 1991 and did it every year after year, very successful program. Well, 3 years ago, we had a new sheriff in town. And anybody that knows Sheriff Ivey knows he has lots of good ideas. And he came and said, you know what, we need something new. We need something fresh. Let's change it up a little. And I listened to him, not because he's bigger than me, which he is, because that would be bullying, and we don't allow for that. That's why part of our contest is anti-bullying. But because I know he's a smart man, and he does have great ideas. But more importantly, I know that he has the interest of every child at play when he's coming up with these ideas. He truly cares about protecting our young people. And so we talked and we said, people don't really use paper calendars as much anymore. They keep their calendars on those little computers you carry around in your pocket or on that desktop. And so the student planner was our idea 3 years ago, because we know every student carries one. We know they take it home with them. They know parents are reading those when teacher sends notes. And it was a great idea because it really does what we want to do, is get this message into the hands of the young people that we want to reach, and so they can see and celebrate that artwork. It's a great new platform, same idea but a new platform, and I really appreciate Sheriff Ivey coming up with some of those ideas. And so at this time I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Ivey and let him explain why these messages are important in this project.
Thank you, Phil. I'll tell you, when we started talking about the planners, none of us were sure how it would work, how that was going to turn out, but we had great guidance and great leadership from Brevard Public Schools and all the team here. And so what we found was that the kids love it, the parents love it, and it's able to get our message out. And our message is very simple. We want the kids to send the message to other kids of don't do drugs, don't be involved in bullying. Let's all work together to have what we believe is the best community in the country. And so we challenged the kids. They rose to the challenge with the help of their art teachers and the other leaders from their schools. And I think all of us were pleasantly surprised at some of the work product that came out over the last 3 years, and this year is certainly no different. So for us, it was basically building a partnership with the kids to let them send the message, and then us just giving them a vehicle to send that message by. And I think this is just an absolute great tool. The kids have fun with it. We have fun with it. And we certainly appreciate all of your support in doing that. So I know we've got the kids here with us tonight, and our state attorney, who, by the way, just as of Friday, ran unopposed for a very good reason, because he does a tremendous job for us here in Brevard County. So please give him a round of applause. He does excellent work. So we're gonna announce the winners, and Dr. Blackburn, I think we're gonna ask you to come down and take pictures with them, or is Chairman coming down? And Dr. Blackburn, be sure to wear your Gator lanyard, sir.
That was the only objection I had. I was going to ask him to take that horrible blue and orange thing off, but I guess, just go to college, kids. Whatever it is, go to college. If you want to, you guys want to stand over there. Okay, we're going to start off with the first group was from kindergarten through second grade. We did 3 different age groups. And this winner is in second grade at Audubon Elementary, and I'm not sure if she made it or not. I'm hoping maybe after we started. And that's Miss Kaliana Napoleon from Audubon Elementary. Is Kaliana here? Oh, she is here. Oh, great. Okay. And I'd also like to recognize from Audubon Elementary the art teacher that was involved, Miss Bonnie Spiker, and I don't believe she could be here tonight, and also the principal, Dr. Lisa Pinelli. Thank you all very much for your participation. All right, now in grade 3 through 6, the winner in 5th grade from Jupiter Elementary, Miss Alyssa Montanez. And a great message, a true friend doesn't let a friend do drugs. And that was a lot of the themes throughout. And that's what we're talking about, is trying to empower and encourage other leaders within those age groups to really look out for their friends. And that's very important. I'd also like to, the art teacher for Jupiter Elementary that was involved in this, Miss Brittany Erickson. Brittany, are you here? Play. And the principal, Miss Sherry Troisi. Again, thank you. Okay, for 7th and 8th grade, from 8th grade, Delora Middle, Miss Angelina Stahl. The winner, okay. And art teacher from Delora Middle School, Mrs. Vicki Thacker. And the principal, Mr. Bobby Pruitt. Thank you all very much. Thanks again to the school board, Dr. Blackburn, for Bridget, and all the teachers, parents, students. Again, you make this a great program, and we couldn't do it without you, and we really appreciate your support, and we look forward to those artists next year, too. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, that brings us to presentations. Dr. Blackburn, please tell us about tonight's presentation.
First is item D8 regarding the initial new funding outlook for fiscal year 2016-2017. Our Chief Financial Officer, Penny Zerker, will make the presentation.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to take a look at the district's initial funding outlook with a focus on new FEFP funding for fiscal year 2016-2017. These are the funds available to the district to cover cost increases, new initiatives, and salary and benefit increases. The FEFP, or Florida Education Finance Program, is the funding formula used by the state of Florida to fund education. It is legislatively enacted, and as a result, the legislature makes tweaks to it every year. In some cases, the tweaks are to our benefit, as with the federally connected funding we initially received in 2015-16, and at other times it's not. The funding formula is based on student enrollment, beginning with projections made in the winter of the previous year. There are two main counting periods that are used in the calculation. The first in October and the second in February. Students are counted during an 11-day window in each of these months, and the totals of those counts are used to determine the number of students enrolled. There are a couple of adjustments to our student enrollment that can be made by the state during the year. The first is proration. Proration occurs when the total state enrollment is greater than its projections. In this situation, the funding is prorated to match the total dollars appropriated by the legislature. The second is recalibration. Recalibration occurs when a student transfers from one district to another, or when a student takes virtual classes over and above their brick and mortar class schedule. Next, we're going to look at the changes made to the FEFP funding formula by the legislature between the fiscal years 2016-2017 and fiscal year 2015-16. The base student allocation was increased 0.15%, or $6.26 per student. The projected enrollment for students was increased 522 students, and the declining cost differential, this is to account for the cost differences between counties, dipped below 1.0 for the district. Our school taxable property values increased 6.29%. During the budget conference meetings of the state legislature, the required local effort, this is the millage that we're required to levy in order to receive state funding, was reduced from the proposed millage of 4.984 to the state's rollback rate of 4.694. This was a decrease of 0.29 mils reduction. This was agreed to in order to compensate the taxpayer for the increase in property values, thereby keeping the taxes paid by the taxpayer at the same level as fiscal year 2015-16. For Brevard, this translates to an RLE, or required local effort millage, of 4.718, and that is 0.306 mils less than what we levied for this year, 2015-16. Our discretionary millage will stay the same. Looking at the actual calculation for 2016-17 in the first column and 15-16 in the second, the third column is the change in funding year over year. You can see the base student allocation, we gained $492,636. Our state categorical funding, these are funds legislated by the state that tells us how we must use them, increased $4.2 million. Our local funds received from the RLE, the required local effort millage, decreased $296,468, even though our property tax values increased 6.29%. Class size reduction increased $651,934, while the net of discretionary lottery and school recognition only increased $29,708. Because of the increase in our property value and the discretionary millage rate staying the same, we'll see an increase of $1.5 million from that millage. The bottom line, the impact of all of these changes is $7,280,344 of new funding over and above what we received in 2015-2016. Included in this increase is approximately $448,125 that is committed to categoricals we do not include in our discretionary funding. So we're going to have to reduce that from the 7.280 because we have to spend that on mandated items. The contribution percentage to the FRS for employee retirement has increased from 7.26% to 7.52%. This equates to approximately $920,000 of additional costs to the district, so that will need to be deducted. In addition, with increased student enrollment comes increased staffing to service those students. The increase in staffing is approximately 17 teachers at a cost of $56,167 in salaries and benefits per teacher. This equates to approximately $972,000 to be deducted again from the 7.28. Lastly, a portion of the new funding must also be allocated to charter schools for their increased enrollment, class size, transportation, and reading allocation. This equates to another 2.6. After deducting these commitments, the district is left with approximately $2.3 million to fund its priorities. The last thing I'd like us to look at is a historical analysis of new funding over the last 4 years. This graph runs from 2013-14 on your far left to 2016-17 on your right. As you can see from this graph, 2016-17 has received the lowest amount of funding, new funding, over the past 4 years. In 2013-14, we received $22.6 million in new money. However, the majority of that, $12.6 million, was tied up in Governor Scott's funding for teacher raises. The district utilized an additional $2.4 million to provide salary increases for the remainder of the staff. Another $2.6 million went towards FRS contribution increases, and $1.6 million each to health insurance contributions and dual enrollment fees. Approximately $1.3 million was used to cover budget cuts that year. In 2014-15, $8.3 million went towards salary increases, $1.4 million to categoricals, and another $1.3 million towards the FRS contribution. In 2015-16, the district fulfilled its commitment regarding salary increases by utilizing $14 million of new money to fund the increases. $1.2 million went into categoricals, and $700,000 went towards staffing increases. We were also fortunate enough to get the federally connected funding of $2.6 million in 2015-16 as an initial funding. And that is our current financial position and a historical look. Can I answer any questions at this time?
Any board members? Mrs. Nisi?
I'm just saying, I like that. I like that graph. Can I have that in color? And I think we ought to have that easily posted. That's probably the best graphic I've seen yet.
Thank you.
On where the money goes, because we get that a lot. You know, how have you spent that money? Where has it gone? And that's probably the most easily understood graphic I've seen yet. So
thank you.
I want access to that.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? I think that's great that it shows how tight our hands are on revenue, and especially when the state says that, oh, lots of extra money for education, and everybody goes, oh, great things are about to happen. It's nice to show them, well, it's not all what it appears to be. Also, I don't believe that our citizens realize that when they are giving us more money, it's actually additional revenue that we're actually paying up to the state that they're giving back. So we're giving ourselves a little bit more money. They're taking credit for it, but that's okay. They've done some good things for us along the way. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Blackburn, next.
Next, we will hear from Jane Respis, Director of Professional Learning and Development. She will provide the TNTP Insight Survey results.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Blackburn and the public. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to you. Our teachers took, in January 2016, 84% of them participated in an online survey to gather data to inform our school and district improvement efforts. National district data were collected from November 2015 through January from 859 schools in 10 different districts. And I want to point out that 84%, like I said, of our teachers participated in this, and that was a 3% increase. And we really appreciate that. So why do we take this survey? Why does instructional culture matter? Well, it matters to our teachers and it matters for our teachers and our students, because schools where there is a strong instructional culture retain more of their effective teachers, and we achieve greater academic success with our students. In fact, when TNTP looks at these schools, they have schools where they are in the top quartile of schools within the survey and bottom quartile within the survey. Those schools within the top quartile, they have student growth scores that are typically 22% higher in those schools in reading and 29% higher in math. And in bottom quartile schools, we might expect that we can lose twice as many of those effective teachers in the next 2 years. And we want to keep those effective teachers in our schools. So how does Insight help me as a former school principal or a current school principal? It helps school leaders build those strong instructional cultures because we look at exemplars from throughout the nation, and we have a lot of them here in Brevard County, I will tell you. So it identifies schools with strong instructional cultures. The top quartile shows that some schools thrive despite having similar challenges. The reports identify which of those schools with strong leadership practices, what they do differently. How can that help me if I'm a school where I would like to build up my culture? And schools within the same community face similar challenges. So what are the elements associated with the successful school? Successful schools articulate that clear vision. They ensure that that vision is shared by the teachers. The teachers know about it. And we as leaders support those teachers in realizing that vision. So the Insight survey questions there are 3 associated that help them with the index, and those are: the expectations for effective teaching are clearly defined at my school. Teachers at my school share a common vision of what effective teaching looks like, and my school is committed to improving my instructional practice. The Instructional Culture Index scores are based on a 10-point scale. Schools' instructional culture scores within Brevard County ranged from 9.8 to 3.7, and the average within Brevard County was 8.0, and that's an increase of 0.3, up from 7.7 in 2015. So as I alluded to before, given such strong local exemplars, we really have a great opportunity for improvement, and we can learn from each other. Top quartile schools within BPS have very strong local exemplars. 33% of our BPS schools are in the top quartile of participating schools nationally. And you see here, so our top quartile is 33%, up from 28% last year, and of course the national top quartile average is 25%. These were the 4 areas that were the highest. Those were our strengths within Brevard County. You see leadership, academic expectations, the peer culture, and the school operations. So let me explain this slide to you. The BPS average is the darker blue. The light blue is compared to the national average, so you can see that we are above the national average in each of those 4 areas. The top quartile average is the yellow, top quartile within BPS, and the top quartile schools nationally are in the orange. So you can see we are above the national average in those 4 areas. Here I wanted to show you that we improved in those areas from last year. We improved from 7.7 to 8.1 in the leadership. Our top quartile went up 0.4 in the top 4 under leadership. Look over to peer culture, you'll see that we improved 0.2 there and another 0.2 of the top quartile. I don't have those under academic expectations and school operations because academic expectations, this year they were different questions associated with Florida standards, and last year they were different, and then this year with school operations that was not included last year. So here's another way to look at our culture index ranges from across, and you see where they are. So we had 22 schools within the top quartile, and to be in that range, my school had to score 8.9 to 9.8. The middle half, 7.4 to 8.8, there were 44, and from 3.7 to 7.3, and 22 other schools. Now, this compares us to all of the national district schools. So again, we have 33% within our top quartile, and that was an improvement over 28%. We still have a lot of room for growth with 11% in the bottom quartile compared to others nationally. And you see the top quartile range for, on the right there, is 8.7 to 10 within the nation, and the average index score for top quartile was 9.2. So this graph shows us all of the schools are on here, and it shows us that 60% improved their index score from last year, and 26% improved by 1 point or more. So this slide really helps us understand that if it's on the radar of the teachers, if it's on my radar as a principal, as an assistant principal, and as a district leader, that makes a difference. I'm going to go over some 3 key findings. These 3 key findings of I as a principal, when I want to make a difference in my school, these 3 areas make a big difference in my school. And first, I'm going to go over the learning environment. So I highlighted over here, and I want you to see the difference between the gaps between the top quartile schools and the bottom quartile schools. And you will see that the large gaps exist between those, particularly in the area of learning environment. From a 9.0 at our top quartile schools to a 6.3 average within the bottom quartile. I also want to note that you will see the straight line across is the national district for top quartile average, and then the dotted line is the national district average. So you might say, Jane, what did they ask? You know, what were these belief statements that the teachers were responding to? So let's look at those 6 within learning environment. My school is a good place to teach and learn. And in parentheses, I put how much above or below we were or equal to the national average. School leaders promote a safe and productive learning environment in my school. Across my school, there are consistent expectations and consequences for student behavior. Teachers and leaders at my school immediately address student misbehavior in shared school spaces like the hallways, like the lunchroom. Interactions between students and adults at my school are respectful. And school leaders provide me with the resources and the support that I need to maintain the high standards for student behavior. I'm going to call your attention on this next slide to questions 3 and questions 4, because they were only 4% above the national average. Again, across my school, there are consistent expectations for consequences, and teachers and leaders at my school immediately address that student behavior. Okay, so where do we have growth opportunities within learning environment and index culture? We definitely do. And we have 7.7 was our average with BPS. 7.3 is the national average. Our top quartile was at a 9 and an 8.7 within the national average. So we're not as high above there. On this is a way to show you where our BPS average is in learning environment relative to the 2 questions that I highlighted earlier for you. And you will see that I want to show you the difference of the BPS average of 58% and the BPS top quartile average of 81%. And then with teachers and leaders immediately addressing that student misbehavior, 65% is our average, and at the top quartile, 86%. So you see, we do have a lot to learn from each other about what might we be doing differently at different schools. So similarly, BPS teachers at top quartile schools are about twice as likely as those at bottom quartile schools to agree that there are consistent expectations and consequences to that student behavior, and that misbehavior is immediately addressed. And you can see that here. The percent of teachers agreeing or strongly agreeing within the bottom quartile, 35%, as opposed to the top quartile in 81%. 43% on the immediately addressing those student misbehavior at a bottom quartile school versus 86%. This shows us the BPS average and the top quartile average within schools for learning environment across, but I wanted to put those in there, the national district average of 7.3, and we were above those. And the national, but we are not at the national district of the 8.7 there. Learning environment is really important to retain those teachers, to keep those teachers who are highly effective, making sure that they know that where I work is a good place to teach and a good place to learn. So you see here with this is that the schools who have more teachers agreeing that they're good places to teach and learn, they have fewer highly effective teachers who are planning to leave. They're planning to stay. So that is what we want. Teachers at top quartile BPS schools are even more likely than teachers at top quartile schools nationwide to agree that their schools are safe, that they're respectful, that they're productive, and yet, as I've alluded to before, there's significant gaps that we can certainly improve upon. My school is a good place to learn. Look at that difference between 61% and 96%. School leaders promote a safe and productive learning environment, 63 to 96. And the interactions between the students and adults at my school are respectful. So let's go to observation and feedback, because this is another key indicator that if I want to improve as a leader, this is an area that I can really help my instructional culture get better. Now, I combined observation and highlighted it also with evaluation, because observation, those formative opportunities where I go into a teacher's classroom and then I afterward or right after the lesson or the next day that I'm talking about what we saw and giving them good constructive feedback, those all go together hand in glove. So the top quartile BPS schools meet or exceed the national top quartile average in all the domains, but again, there are large gaps between our top and our bottom quartile schools with observation and feedback and evaluation. So you see a 2.0 difference here between top and bottom quartile in observation and a 1.9 difference in the evaluation piece. And then you see the national district average and the top quartile average going across there as well. So the 6 belief statements they responded to in these were, do I get enough feedback on my instructional practice? The feedback I get from being observed helps me improve student outcomes. And you see there our percentages equal to the national average there. I regularly discuss feedback about my teaching with an instructional leader. We are 1% below the national average on 3 and on 4. That each time I'm observed, I get feedback that gives me specific actions. When I get feedback after an observation, I receive support to implement those strategies. That might include someone modeling that for me. That might include having a chance to practice, observing someone else. And number 6, my observer consistently follows up to see how successful I was after implementing that feedback, and we're equal to the national average. So on this one, I want to also call your attention to questions 3 and 4, that we were below the national average on that one, because we're not used to being below the national average. in Brevard Public Schools. We are used to being way above the national average, so this is a real opportunity for improvement here that we can work toward. I regularly discuss feedback about my teaching with an instructional leader at my school, and that is really key. You know, we keep hearing from teachers when we get to visit with the person who observed my room, be it either an administrator or a teacher leader, it makes a huge difference in my instructional practice. And that each time I am observed, I get feedback. We learned in some other training earlier this year through leadership with Dr. Kathy Lassiter that walkthroughs alone don't make a bit of difference in my practice. You can come watch me teach, but if you leave and we don't ever discuss it, it has no bearing at all on whether I'm going to improve or decline in my ability. The only way I get better is if you and I visit about what you observed in my room. So, and I think those two questions really point to that. So again, the growth opportunities here, this is just another way to look at it. So here is an additional way on the observation and feedback. So our BPS average was 55%, and it's just a percent below, of course, of the national average. The BPS top quartile average, 75%, and the national average. So you see these are right in line with the national average, and so we have a big opportunity there. So our observation and feedback domain scores range from 3.2 to a 9.0, and the average was a 7.2. Teachers at top quartile BPS schools are observed about as often as teachers across the district, but they're more likely to agree that they get enough feedback and that the feedback helps them. So that was a logical question. Well, at the top quartile schools, are the administrators getting in there more often? Is that what's happening? No. It's just that they're giving them, they are doing the feedback. And the feedback is specific, and it's assisting the teacher relative to improving student outcomes. That specific actionable feedback is so important. Schools where more teachers agree that the feedback contains specific action, they can take that to improve, and they have more teachers who agree that they receive enough feedback. And the question associated with that was, each time I'm observed, I get feedback that gives me specific actions to improve my teaching practice. Teachers at top quartile schools are about as likely, twice as likely actually, as teachers at bottom quartile to discuss that feedback with school leaders or to receive any follow-up, as you can see from these three questions. That they regularly discuss feedback. You'll see the big difference between bottom quartile and top quartile. My observer consistently follows up with me, 39 to 75%. And when I get feedback after an observation, I receive the support. So strong evaluation systems are built around that strong observation and feedback practices. Schools where more teachers agree, again, that they get it, believe that their evaluator has an accurate perception of of their teaching. That is really important, and when you dive a little bit deeper into it, that is an area that is worth looking into as a principal, that I'm giving specific feedback to them, and then they're going to agree or strongly agree more about my perception of their teaching. So that is a good segue into evaluation. So this is another growth opportunity for us, because you will see that we are equal to the national average here. And the BPS average is at the national average of 7.1, and our top quartile is at the national average of an 8.1. Our domain scores in evaluation went from 4.6 to 8.8, and an average score was 7.1. We were up from last year. Let me point that out to you. We were up from last year, so we did gain over from 6.6 and moved up to 7.1, which is cause for very pleased about that. So in evaluation, I wanted to show you how we had increased from the previous year. The expectations for effective teaching are clearly defined at my school. Last year, the BPS average 77% in that area, and it's up to 79. The national average went up also 2 percentage points, interestingly enough, and our top quartile from 93 to 94. Now, this one is high. I know the criteria that will be used to evaluate my performance as a teacher, and we are still, our principals and our teachers are doing a great job of knowing that and understanding the criteria, and the teachers are doing a great job of keeping up with that also. We increased from 81% to 85%. On these 2 questions, we have more opportunity for growth between bottom quartile and top quartile. At my school, evaluation ratings are accurate reflections of the teacher. And you see we have improved everywhere in those 4 areas, at the national average also. But we are a little bit below the national average relative to the top quartile. And again, we are not used to that. I agree with the criteria that will be used to evaluate my performance. So we went up this year from 31 to 45. And in the top quartile, we went up from 38 to 58% in our top quartile schools. So if I was back at a school today, I'd be looking at, how did you do that at some of my colleagues? What did you do? How did you get assistance in this area? What did you do? What did you say? How did you support your teachers here? The teacher evaluation process helps identify my strengths and weaknesses. You can see that there is a big difference between the BPS average and then the BPS top quartile. And the person who evaluates my performance has an accurate perception of my classroom practice. And that goes back to the other about feedback when we discussed it earlier. Now, this is an interesting question. The person who evaluates my performance knows how much growth and progress my students have made this year. And I think this really goes back to our collaborative learning environment and ensuring as leaders and as all the teachers that we know how our students are doing, whether I'm the principal, the assistant principal, that we are highly engaged in that process as much as we can be. The TNTP Insight Loop, this is something that would continue year after year. So we took it in January of 2016. We shared the results with our principals in March, and principals shared it with staff. We collaboratively goal set with school leadership, and then the Leadership Institute will be having for leadership and instructional development this summer, working on aspects relative to the social, emotional, so that we can look at learning environment and so forth. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board members have any comments or questions? Mrs. Nisi?
I guess, Dr. Blackburn, this is more for you. The board, we've always talked about, every child deserves a quality school and a quality classroom. We talked a lot about these scores as a whole and moving forward. I'm concerned about that bottom quartile. What are we doing about, some of that bottom quartile? Is that indicative of low teacher morale? What are we talking about? Give me some descriptors that would be characteristic of a school with those low scores. What are we talking about? What would be, I don't want to know the school name. I don't want to know anything. I don't want that. But what would be, what are we looking at for a school like that? And what are we doing to ensure, because those middle and upper schools, everything that she talked about, we know we're moving forward, and I get that. But I wouldn't want my child, I'm thinking if I'm a parent, that's not the type of school. If we have low morale, we have, from what I've heard from our speaker, those are the schools that teachers are wanting to move out of. Those are the ones that teachers are frustrated in, given everything that I've heard. So what are we doing to turn that around? That's what I'm not hearing.
So first, as I think most people have heard me say, student achievement is our #1 priority. Our classroom teachers are by far our number one kind of resource asset to get that done. And principals are really, really important, the most important aspect of the culture, the environment of the school. And so for me, what this information does is really bring, I think, what we already know kind of anecdotally, but it creates very precise information that principals can use to grow on, and that those of us who supervise principals can use to set expectation and hold individuals accountable. What we've done since having this information, I think it was February or March, reiterating the expectation with principals, sharing the information with them, asking them to start sharing with their staff and coming up with ways to improve, and also sharing with them how their peers did, so they know the names of the schools that are in the upper quartiles, and so that they can reach out to their peers and make use of either large group or small group learning sessions with other principals under the guidance of now their area superintendents, next year leading and learning assistant superintendents. So it's the constant drive that this is really, really important, and that it's not optional to have a highly collaborative, nurturing environment or school culture for all teachers to work under. So those are the priorities, and this is really one very, very good way to receive that information.
Anybody else? Thank you. We are now at public comments. The maximum allotted time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Clarification of information presented and answers to questions specific to district business and educational matters will be posted on the school board's website in a section called For the Record. Please be reminded that profane, abusive, or slanderous speech is not permitted. Before we begin, I'd just like to let our audience know that up until 2 years ago, public speaking was not required by law, but this board has always listened to what the public had to say. 2 years ago, the state passed a law that requires that we hear speakers on topics on our agenda. They also put in some rules into the law that state that we can limit speakers, or we can cut off as based on the topic and redundancy, so that we don't have to hear the same thing over and over and over again, especially if it's not on our agenda. Tonight, the majority, if not all the speakers, are speaking on a harassment policy. I want to let you all know that is not on our agenda tonight, but we will hear all the speakers tonight. We'll take 10 up front, as we normally do, and the rest after, towards the end of the meeting. But in the future, if we wind up having excessive number of speakers, then I will probably limit the number of speakers so it doesn't impact us getting our business complete. So again, tonight we will hear all of the speakers. We will start first with, looks like Jim Capel, followed by Edmund Monin, and then Kenneth Delgado. Please speak into the microphone and state your name. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. My name is Jim Capel, and just want to thank you for making the Anti-Harassment and Discrimination Workshop public and continuing to hear us address this issue, and to hear us and give us the opportunity to speak. At the workshop, Dr. Theddy was the staff voice, and the themes among the staff and principals were that they have a responsibility to all the students, and that all meant all, and that the policies address all already. And they felt that there was no need for additional language, that the language is inclusive but needed direction. And they asked for guidance on what to do, how to do student records, and clearly address the procedural issues. And it seems that the TNTP findings support that based on the request for staff for behavioral guidance. But at the end of the workshop, it got misconstrued somehow that the staff was looking for a policy change, not just procedural direction. On to legal counsel, Mr. Bolden said that there was no legal need to address any language change, and that he admitted the sexual orientation and gender identity language is a mess, that the law is subjective and it's not rational at this point. And he stated the board is given no legal direction by the state or the county to include, yet the board said that they desire to still include and pursue inclusion. So Mr. Bolden stated that if it is included, the procedures must follow the sexual orientation and gender policy. And I've heard that you feel that you can limit sexual orientation, gender identity policy through your procedures. Mr. Bolden stated clearly that's exactly what you cannot do. If the policy includes SOGI, your procedures must match SOGI definitions, and those definitions have already been defined. And when those definitions are applied, and you say, well, that's not what we wanted, it doesn't matter what you wanted. Those additional definitions of the SOGI language have already been defined on a national language on a level. So you can't adopt SOGI language in the policy and then go against that language in your procedure. That is what Mr. Bolden said would lead to lawsuits. And it seems for the most part, that's what the board and the superintendent are most concerned about. And Mr. Ziegler and Dr. Blackburn referenced that concern within the workshop. So it's been suggested if you want to include policy language that you can define within your procedure, you must use different language than sexual orientation and gender identity. Sexual orientation and gender identity has already been defined for you. Like it or not, it's already defined on a national level. And to stay out of legal trouble, you must use words that you can define within your own procedures. Suggestion is to use those words already found in your district language. That language is found on the victim incident summary, and it's listed as sexual preference instead of sexual orientation and gender identity. If you use sexual preference, you can define it the way you want it to be defined and apply it the way you want it to be applied in the Brevard County school system as you see fit. This will keep you out of legal battles in the future, which is a concern apparently. It will also convey to the LGBT community that you're concerned for them, which we all are, and it will also bring peace to those concerned where the SOGI language would take us as a district. Most of all, hopefully, it would protect all students as you define your procedures for all students. Thank you.
Next speaker is Edmund Monin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for pulling together the workshop. I thought it was great. However, based on the information presented, I had a hard time understanding the outcome. The discussion I heard was very clear, and my takeaways are as follows. Number one, per our legal counsel, there's no need to make a policy change. Secondly, our principals surveyed stated that we have a procedure for handling these issues within our bullying policy, and it works quite well. Next, only 2% of the incidents to date were categorized as sexual. That's 7 out of 312. It seemed to me that we are pushing an agenda that we have other things we should be doing. We talked to the teachers' responses. They talked about safety. The teachers I talked to were also concerned with safety, but they were concerned that the changes we're proposing are going to create even more of a safety issue within our schools. They also talked about direction and the need for teachers to be trained. Teachers, again, I talked to said, we don't have a clue how we would implement this. And lastly, the legal advisor that recommended the changes stated that he recommended it based on the fact that the train is moving that way. I have a hard time accepting a recommendation based on that statement. I guess I ask you, do we really want to define sexist based on the direction the train's moving? I don't think so. I feel the message was clear. We need to table the policy language issue and focus on procedures. While we're doing that, we can follow what's going on in the United States for and against and develop some real facts to determine how we want to develop a action plan for the future. My name's Ed Monin. I'm a parent and a resident of Brevard School Districts, and I vote no for this proposed change. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth Delgado, followed by Richard Charbonneau, and then Sabrina Taraboletti.
May I first say thank you for giving us this grace. We want to let you know that we made sure that 50 people didn't come to respect your time as well as our own. So I just want to make that clear. In reference to the latest thing, the latest meeting that you have, I've broken it down into 3 categories. Three things that bring me a smile, 3 things that made me go, and then the OMG positions. Now, the first one, things that bring me to a smile, is that the DOE is not asking for the verbiage, nor is it required to be there. That makes me smile. The Jeffrey Johnson Stand Up for Student Rights created sexual preference as the proper designation. That makes me smile. The state has added sexual preference. That makes me smile. Principals are interested in all students and are addressing all bullying issues at all levels effectively. That makes me smile. Principals and teachers need direction, not a change in language. That makes me smile. Amen. Things that make me go, the student, the person who represented Student Voice said that adults see bullying differently as the youth see it more like teasing. Makes me go, Is it the adults that are making it an issue when, as she said, the youth simply, Mark Langdorf highlighted all the counties that include LGBT language in 5 counties. Does that mean the other 62 counties don't have any issue? And why did he highlight just those that did? The schools are handling, through procedures, handling the bullying effectively. DOE and our school attorney said it wasn't required. Why are we dealing with this? OMG, common bathroom. Apparently, our president is making it an issue, contrary to some who have said that we're exempt from that issue. OMG, that we are making policy because it seems like we're going in that direction. The reality is that the presidency is changing. The direction could change. OMG. Bullying and harassment of 314 victims, 7 in reference to sexual preference. So we're going to address 2.3 expense of the 97.7 of harassment issues. OMG. There are hundreds that we do need to also add to it. Dr. Blackburn said in his first address that we should be dealing with burning buildings. OMG, are we creating a fire? Is teaching our children the LGBT position the next step in changing the teaching curriculum for public schools?
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you for your time.
Next up is Richard Charbonneau, followed by Sabrina Taraboletti, followed by Lee Proctor. Mr. Charbonneau.
Richard Charbonneau, Satellite Beach. Pardon me tonight. I'm a little bit slow on my feet. I took half my pain medication tonight to make sure that I didn't nod off. I'd like to do a couple of shout-outs tonight, rather than be negative all the time. And I'd like to shout out to the new CFO. That was a good presentation. I understood everything. Your previous ad hoc CFO, I had no idea what she was talking about. I don't think she did either. This gal knows her stuff. I think it's a good choice, and I think she'll do well for you. He's gone, but I'd have like a shout out to Sheriff Ivy, Joe Scott, who was a teacher at Satellite, Suzanne Haynes, and Doug Cook, the assistant principal. You all know Lily got into the 6-year law program. She got a scholarship for $100,000. We just received another scholarship for $20,000. So thanks for all those who were involved. And she says to tell Phil Alcher she's going to be a prosecutor. Watch out. Shout out to John Craig for realizing that Brevard Public Schools is a billion-dollar company with 9,500 employees, the most real estate in the country, or in the county, I'm sorry. And yes, we should have a legal department. Why we've not had one is beyond me. At the same time, I'm puzzled, why the other members didn't see this. My assumption is John is the only board member that has managed something larger than a home budget or a paper route. Him from being in the Navy and Craig Technologies, he knows what big business is, and he needs to know that, that he pointed out the need, for a legal department. I'm still asking what the plan is for the at-risk students. Dr. Blackburn and I talked about this. The mentoring surely works better than throwing money at it. And mentoring program is good. The last presenter was talking about the evaluation of BPS versus national average. And I just sat there chuckling, and I said, whose measuring stick are we measuring this by? And why do we care? I mean, in the old days, 1 foot was the size of the king's foot. So he made the measuring stick. But I mean, who made this measuring stick? And do we come up to this average nationally by somebody else's stick? I mean, I think it's, silly. How much time do I have, Andy?
Huh?
How much time do I have left?
About a minute.
I think we've, this gay anti-harassment, transgender thing, I think we've kind of beat this issue to death. We need to, make a decision, move along. I mean, we've had so many meetings about this. This is ridiculous. I mean, here we are, the billion-dollar company, and we're talking about this one issue.
Thank you. Time's up.
Thanks. Thank you.
Next speaker is Sabrina Tarboletti, followed by Lee Proctor, and I'm going to get it wrong again, Vita Panikas. Vita. One of these days I'm going to get it right. Practice makes perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sabrina Marcus Tarboletti. I lived in Brevard County since 1984, and I'm speaking here today to speak for moving to add gender identity and sexual orientation to the Non-Discrimination Act for students and employers in Brevard County. Like I said, I'm a resident of Cape Canaveral, lived here since 1984. I moved here to work at the space program, and I'm a 20-year veteran. I worked on the space shuttle for 20 years. I was married here at Divine Mercy, raised 2 children, and raised them in Titusville. They went to Madison School, by the way, Alexandra and Matthew. Alexandra graduated with honors, attended UCF on a full scholarship, won the United Space Alliance Award for Achievement, and is now finishing her PhD at the University of Akron in chemistry. My son Matthew also graduated with honors. He attended my alma mater, United States Merchant Marine Academy, and is now in the United States Navy as a pilot. Now it's the good news. The bad news is in 2003, I was summarily dismissed from United Space Alliance after I announced I was transgender and I was going to change my gender. In 2007, I testified to Congress on that topic, and over the next 5 or 6 years, I spent jumping from position to position. I worked for the Department of Transportation in Florida, filling potholes and putting concrete sidewalks in because I was raised with a moral ethic, and I would rather work a $10 an hour job than go on any other kind of benefit. I finally, when I went to go to my kids' sports games, I had to sit with the opposing team for fear that they would have retribution they would feel retribution against them because they had a transgender parent. By the way, they love me, and yes, everything's great, and I have 2 terrific kids. In 2008, I was able to reinvent my career and return to sea as a merchant mariner. Worked my way back up through 3rd engineer, 2nd engineer, 1st engineer. For those who know, it's pretty hard to do, but I restarted my career. And I'm now the chief engineer of the NOAA ship LM Shimada, which is a federal vessel. The reason I am working there is because the federal government does have the verbiage to protect sexual orientation and gender identity. I have been pushed out of other jobs because of my gender identity. So it's important that the language is put in there. I'm telling you all this to show you that LGBT are productive parts of the community. We are your neighbors, your friends, taxpayers. We help, we mow our lawns, we do everything everybody else does. We really would rather just like to be just average, normal people. Don't ask me why I was inflicted with this, other than God loves diversity. So,
Thank you. Your time is up.
thank you very much.
Lee Proctor.
My name's Lee Proctor. I live in Cocoa. Not the most well-spoken person, but I had one question. Does anybody on the board have any agenda towards this? In other words, they want this to go through? Because if they do...
We don't have interactive conversation, and we spoke on this topic, all of us, many times.
Well, I just want to know because
So
they
go ahead,
shouldn't be
continue.
allowed to vote. So I'm just wanting to know. So anyways, I just don't understand that, but, okay. We care about everybody. You know, we love everybody. You know, I don't understand. It's not a war. We're not against the LGBT. We're not against them. We pray for them. We want them to have a place to go that day that we all have to go through. We're born and we die, and when we die, we have a place to go. If you believe in that. Becoming homosexual, lesbian, bisexual, or anything else, I carry this everywhere I go. It's the first book you see when you walk in my house. I believe in it, and I will die for it. We want everybody to have that opportunity to be able to go home and be with their father. That's all we want. And you know, and we want our children protected. I just don't understand. It's like he just said it best. You know, he's got great kids and everything's great. I worked on the first space shuttle. I was on the first retrieval ship, pulled in the first solid rocket boosters. I was there. I did it all too, but I'm still a male. But you know, when y'all were having your workshop, I heard, but I don't know if that's true or not, that someone had said that most of the counties in Florida were voting yes for this amendment. I don't know if that's true or not. That same night, Marion County voted it out, and Marion County said that all students will use the facilities according to their birth certificate. They've been doing it. They have a bathroom. It's right there. We're not discriminating against them. They have their own bathroom. The teachers use it. They can use it. And the poor, I mean, I kind of felt sad for the little guy. He started crying. Oh, well, it makes me late for lunch, and I want to get dressed with the guys. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it, but it was a young lady, and I mean, she was very robust, and I mean, she did not look like a male. I mean, she looked like a female, and she wanted to get...
Thank you. Time is up.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. God bless America.
Vida, followed by John Arrigo and Jane Matthews.
You're getting really good on the first name.
I'm working on it.
Good evening. My name is Vita Penikas. I am a parent, activist, and advocate. I want to apologize for a misstatement I made at the last board meeting. I was speaking off the cuff, and I incorrectly stated my argument. I am truly sorry for any confusion or misunderstanding. So I'm going to try it again. A transgender man is a man. Homosexuality is no more a choice than heterosexuality is. These are all variations of the human condition evidenced by centuries of LGBTQ people inhabiting our planet. As our board, Dr. Blackburn, and staff move forward updating policy and procedure, I'd like to make just a few reminders. The law is clear. The interpretation and guidance from the Justice Department, Office of Civil Rights, and the Department of Education are clear. Make no mistake about it. We have students in Brevard County being systematically discriminated against. The only reason you don't know about it is because they think that's the rule and they don't have the resources to take the district to court. A student should not have to go to court to be able to participate in programs with their gender. Our LGBTQ brothers and sisters deserve our full acceptance, inclusion, and support. And I would like to respond to one speaker earlier this evening. Yes, our presidency is changing. Neither one of our major candidates are homophobes. Thank you.
Thank you. John, followed by Jane Matthews, and then Frank Campana.
I want to thank Desmond Blackburn, Karen Henderson, Andy Ziegler, and Misty Belford for personally meeting with me. Thank you very much for taking that time. I know your time is valuable. I actually have something I'd like to read to you. This is very encouraging. It was encouraging to me. I live in Melbourne. I have 3 children, and this is a Florida school board limits public bathrooms to birth gender. In Ocala, Florida, this was April 27th, 2016. This just happened. Ocala, Florida, effective this morning, the Merriam County School Board affirmed the constitutional expectation of its students' privacy by requiring students to use the bathrooms in other facility based on biological sex, as requested by the Liberty Council. This 4-1 vote happened late last night on the 27th. It will allow students of only one gender that of their birth into a bathroom or locker room. The vote overturned a previous interpretation unilaterally imposed by the district superintendent, which allowed students to choose which bathroom they wanted based on subjective gender identity. Remember, that word gender identity is open for interpretation. You guys heard Neola. That was open for interpretation. There's 50 different terms. One of those terms is any gender. They could be any gender they want, any given day, any given time. Somebody's born with that? I don't think so. Under today's policy, any student who identifies as transgender may request an appropriate alternate facility if uncomfortable using the facility corresponding to the student's biological sex. Think about that. I'll read it again. Under today's policy, any student who identifies as transgender may request an appropriate alternative facility if uncomfortable using the facility corresponding to the student's biological sex. They didn't have to put the words in. Those words are dangerous. It's going to create discrimination against the religious people. It's going to create discrimination. Those numbers that you see are going to, they're going to shoot up. Liberty Council Representative Harold Hall Phillips before the Merriam County School Board in a support this common sense bathroom policy. Phillips and his son are devout Christians who believe strongly in both biblical modesty and constitutional privacy. 2 months ago, the district superintendent unilaterally began allowing transgender students to pick whatever bathroom they wanted. Last week, Philip's son was extremely upset when he encountered a female student in the boys' bathroom at his high school, Vanguard High School in Ocala, Florida. This was a place where he has a reasonable expectation that they may not encounter the opposite sex. This deeply violated his religious beliefs and personal modesty and his constitutional rights of privacy. Liberty Counsel also offered to defend the school board for free. Liberty Counsel offered to defend the school for free if the board...
Jane Matthews.
I just want to say that I concur with everything the gentleman just spoke. My name is Jane Matthews. I want to thank Dr. Blackburn and all you members of the school board for giving us the privilege to do this right now. My husband and I have resided in this county for over 40 years. I am a retired teacher, and I've had the privilege of teaching the children of our county for over 20 years. So my heart is with the children. My allegiance is to my Lord. And when God created humanity, he created them male and female. And I just want to say that we, the people who elected you, we're hoping that you would stand for us, the people, and say no to improper gender identity and sexual orientation policy, because my concern is for the safety of the students. How do you think the students of Brevard County are going to feel? They're going to feel safe that this proposal is made, that they can go into a restroom if they're a girl or a guy, and then find somebody of the opposite sex there? Is that safe? The LGBT only represents 0.0% of the population. That's less than 1%. Yeah, the Marion County, that just happened April the 27th, 2016. He's correct about that. And also, the federal law, Title IX, the conception was 1992. And that prohibits discrimination based on sex. But it only prohibits discrimination based on male and female. The statute does not, support or requires or even mention the sexual orientation or gender identity. And so there is no legal authority or case law that supports that the students who claim to be students would have access to bathrooms of the opposite sex. It's not there. Also, the federal courts in Virginia also rejected the ACUL and the OCR positions, and they won. Now, for the student that has a problem with gender confusion, they can be accommodated in a private single-use bathroom for a changing area, but that student is not free to override the biology or the safety or the privacy and the religious concerns of a majority of other students by being given access to the opposite sex restrooms or locker rooms. And it violates the First Amendment rights of the students and the teachers. And the Constitution should be our main concern. We need to uphold that. But mostly, we should be concerned for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank, come on up. You'll be our last speaker before business, and the rest of the speakers will come afterwards.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to have an opportunity to speak to you again. I have a love for Christ. I have a love for our country. I have a love for our children. I'm a father of 9, I told you before, and I'm also a teacher. I also work at the Cape, and I'm against bullying. I'm against bullying of all forms. I have a severely handicapped brother, so I'm subjected to this in the forms of bullying, and it's a heartfelt issue with me. But I have to appeal to you with one thing. The Bible tells us that let no man deceive you with vain words. That's what you're hearing sometimes today, vain words. It says, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of the disobedient. Do you understand? Your arms are too short to be boxing with God. We can't be going this direction. What we're doing is we're going against the direction of the grain of way God created us. You're creating a conflict that's internal. We have a moral compass in all of us. It's called our conscience. And our conscience directs us in the right paths that we should go. The Bible also says this, be not you therefore partakers with them, meaning this immoral injustice. For you were sometimes darkness, but now we're supposed to be light. For walk as children in the light. For the fruit of the Spirit is all goodness, righteousness, and truth. We're supposed to give our children truth, providing what is acceptable unto the Lord. We're supposed to provide our children what's acceptable unto the Lord. All that have no fellowship with it, it tells us not to have fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. Listen, I'm a teacher. I'm trying to teach. That's why I'm up here. If we continue to justify what God calls sin and immoral behavior, what we're doing is we're causing an internal conflict for our children. We saw those issues about suicide. We understand that God's word he wrote this 2,000 years ago, and there's a conflict with children. I want to feel this way. I have a feeling inside, should I go this way? No. The Bible tells us clearly we should never go this way. The real men protect women and children. They don't aid in the corruption of the minds of our children. By justifying sin and immoral behavior, what we're doing is we're passing laws to protect those that are in need of Jesus and true healing from God. We think we know better than God. We don't. Not only do we no longer recognize God and his laws, we are passing and applying proposals that go against God and the fabric of his love. Our arms are too short to be boxing for God. This is for reason for, if I have a lawn, right, and it's all green, and I see that's healthy, yeah, that's a good thing. And if I see unhealthy patch of grass, I got to see why that patch of grass is unhealthy. You know why it's unhealthy? Because we no longer recognize how to get us healthy grass again. We don't destroy all the grass to make the other grass look good. No, we take a look at the grass and we say, hey, listen, this grass is unhealthy. We need to know why it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy because we no longer as a nation recognize God and his laws. We love God and we love this country. Eternity is written on the hearts of all men, the Bible says. It's written in the hearts of all men. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Praise you.
The board wishes to thank this evening's speakers. The remainder speakers will be after we attend to business. That moves us to the consent agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 23 agenda items under this category, 4 with prior information.
Does any board member wish to pull any of the consent items? Yeah. Mrs. Nisi?
F28 and F29.
Anybody else?
F18.
Is that your plane?
Good call. I'll pull the Hornet. Previous
Pam,
life.
Pam, please pull F18, F28, and F29. Yeah. Okay. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of those 3 items.
So moved.
Second.
Better perk up over there, Ms. Henderson. You're not going to get in on this. Okay, there was a motion by Ms. Nisi, seconded by Mrs. Belford. Any discussion? Please vote. Mr. Craig, are you technically challenged today? F8. Oh, I can't wait till we upgrade our technology. There we go, 5-0. Imagine that. Okay. Mr. Craig, F18.
Okay, I've got 2 things on this. First, on the job descriptions, I just have to ask Dr. Blackburn, and it may seem petty, but I'm trying to figure it out. Under the job descriptions, specifically, when you look at the amount of physical work required, the Director of Elementary Programs and the Coordinator of Media are required to be physically active and lift 20 pounds. The Assistant Director of Student Activities, which includes athletics, is said to be a sedentary position with no need for any sort of physical exertion. I don't know if that's an oversight, but if it is, I'm confused. I literally do not understand where those came from, if they were just drawn from somewhere else, if they actually are applicable to these job descriptions. It raises that question.
I'm going to call on a lifeline from our HR department on that one.
You only get one tonight, Dr. Blackburn.
I'm sorry, I was being consulted about something else.
All
Can
right.
you repeat what you said?
So the Director of Elementary Programs and I'm talking about the job descriptions. That position and the media representative, they both say that light work, exert up to 20 pounds of force occasionally, lift, carry, push, pull, move objects. But the job description for student activities, which includes overseeing athletics and being on an athletic field, says that it's a sedentary position requiring no physical exertion whatsoever. Why is that?
I would say that that would be something that would need to be reviewed more closely.
Okay. And it requires a coaching certificate, but it's sedentary. So I guess that's where I'm confused.
Are we on the assistant, let me see. Student activities, second page, physical demands and working conditions?
Correct.
Exerts up to 10 pounds of force frequently to lift, carry, push, pull.
Right, sedentary work exerts up to 10. The other two say light physical activity up to 20 pounds. Now, I know that's, it seems like it's a petty issue, but it goes to the point of, are we looking at the job descriptions and making sure that they actually match what it is we're putting out there? And it could be a legal issue too, from a workplace injury type thing.
It is something we will examine.
Okay, thank you. The next is, and I won't harp on it, other than the fact that the new org chart, as I stated the last time, does not have a legal department. I don't understand why. We need a legal department. It needs to be in-house. It needs to be underneath probably the COO or the HR department, as it is in most companies. And that's my opinion. I cannot support this organizational structure without that in there and without discussing how it is going to be set up.
I will speak to that first. As a matter of fact, at the Central Florida School Board Coalition, yesterday this was a topic of conversation. And it's clear that the first and primary legal counsel is to the board, not to staff. If there's a secondary legal counsel, and typically if it's an in-house, then it may be under staff if you have both. Otherwise, first and only would be to the board, so it would hang off of the board. I agree that whether counsel is on staff or counsel is contracted, it should still be in the org chart. It doesn't really matter how they're paid or required, but it should still show where they are in the order of things. And I believe that's what you're getting at.
It is. I would also like to see the discussion about, it doesn't have to be a staff attorney. It could be, a paralegal in-house. Somebody in-house in this building it has nothing to do with the relationship we have now, the way we have done it. As we've said, we've done it this way since 1993, I think. Just because we've always done it that way, as you like to say, Mr. Chair, is not the right answer. So I still go back to the fact that We have a defined legal expectation, and we as a board are I think, it's our job to provide the tools necessary for this organization to succeed. My recommendation remains that we figure out how we're going to include legal, both from putting a block in there, but also how we're going to make sure that we're giving the best service to the people inside this building on a daily basis. You've stated it very correctly. It's the exact way that it should be handled. The board hires the board attorney. We decide whether or not we need extra legal representation for the district. The size of the district, the size of the business would probably generate that discussion. We're the largest business in this county. The fact that we don't have an internal legal department, or at least an internal legal resource, I think is not giving our staff and the folks residing in this building the best tools to succeed.
Understood. I would say, though, relevant to this org chart, if we notice it is from the superintendent down, in my opinion, the current organizational structure, the legal counsel would be pretty much parallel, not parallel, but would be under the board, not under the superintendent. If we move to an in-house, then that warrants that conversation as to whether it would fall beneath. But right now, that wouldn't, the current model wouldn't fall under this chart anyhow, because this is from superintendent down.
I understand that, and again, I'm not pointing at the exact flavor of how a legal department would be, whether it's another attorney, whether it's a sharing of an attorney, whether it's not even an attorney but a paralegal, or some sort of administrative functionality that processes legal requests. Right now, we don't have that. We don't have anybody that we can put a belly button in the building that people can go and push and go, I need legal help, but you know what, I don't have time. It needs to be a process, and that does fall underneath the superintendent, and it needs to be a resource that he and his staff have.
Well, at this point, go ahead, you want to jump in?
That actually is one of the questions that I had when we went through the objectives, the strategic plan objectives, and certainly is something that we have discussed in the past with no closure, I think primarily because we have been in a process of transition, but I think, and we are still in a process of transition, but I feel like we have some stability and direction at this point as an organization, and I do think that it's something that we need to look at. No pointing of fingers, but I feel very strongly that we need to have an internal resource that we can go to for some of the legal issues, for contract evaluation, so that was one of my requests on the objective profiles, was for us to look at our options when it comes to legal and all of the different ways that we could meet all of those needs when it comes to the legal requirements of the district. And I think that we may be at a point where we can go ahead and if we are in agreement as a board, we can provide some direction to move forward on making a decision on that area.
Anybody else like to jump in? I would say then at this point, I would say we should move forward with approving this. I would suggest that we workshop that to give direction, and then we modify this down the road. I don't think that we're going to make a decision on that right now, nor in the next few weeks or a month, and we shouldn't hold up moving forward on these positions. But we should definitely have that conversation. And we discussed today having a capital workshop, and sometimes we need more than one item in a workshop, so maybe that would be the next appropriate topic at a workshop. Thoughts? That work for you, Mr. Craig?
It's not the ideal, but I understand what you're saying, and I certainly agree, because I think the organizational structure is well thought out, with the exception of that. And I made those comments to the superintendent. We had I think some understanding that there is a need there. You know, my opinion would be that you add it in there and you fill it afterwards, but, you know, to then amend the structure, I think is probably counterproductive. I think it's probably better to at least, it doesn't have to have anything in it, but there has to be an idea of where it's going to fall. I don't know where Dr. Blackburn would like a legal department. Well,
Why don't we ask Dr.
Right.
Blackburn what he would like?
Dr. Blackburn, what are your thoughts?
I'm in favor of workshopping the item. I don't think,
Oh, sure, put it all on me.
I like the workshop idea. I think making any substantial change to the org chart at this time, right? That decision, if we make it tonight, would not have been a part of all the conversation and lead up and, you know, to what we're looking at right now. And like I said this morning, around the strategic plan and these are not meant to be shelf documents. They're meant to be living, breathing documents. And I mean, we are the governance team of the district. So upon a workshop, if there's a different direction given to the superintendent, then he'll follow it.
Yes, ma'am.
I might have a middle ground. We have on the org chart, we have potential new position, we have repurposed staff. I would think that perhaps we could fairly easily add in a block here that would, much like the others, where we're not necessarily hiring someone or creating a new position, but we are acknowledging the fact that that needs to be an area of focus as a potential new position but not that we're recommending the position at this time. And then it would still be a part of the org chart. It would be something that we could discuss at workshop, would meet the needs both of Mr. Craig for the structure moving forward, and would certainly keep it as a priority focus for us as far as realizing that there is an important place for legal in our structure.
I don't see the need to make that modification, right? We could make that modification anytime we want. I don't have an opinion of where it should fall, so I don't necessarily want to say stick it in there and vote on it right now, because then I don't know if that's correct or not, where it should fall. I can take a shot at it, but I think we need to have further discussion. And we just brought back from the coalition what all the other districts are doing, so we can pass that out and look at that and use that as a guide, what large districts are doing, small districts. You're right, this is an unresolved topic that we've started probably about a year ago.
I don't think this is the appropriate time. I think any time that we
Correct.
call an audible up here, it's not well thought through and we get ourselves in trouble. I think that we need, the workshop works for me though.
Yeah, nobody's disagreeing. I just don't think this is the time to make that change. Therefore, I need a... Oh, we're not done? Did you have on something else on F-18? I'm sorry. Go for it.
Okay, I was looking at the new elementary programs, the EFP, Enhanced, well, I can't see it because that stupid thing is there. So there is a position called, and it says the elementary director of elementary programs. So I just want to be clear on this. So there's going to be 2 directors of elementary programs? Is that right? Because we have one now and this is a new one? And then what doesn't show on here, and we started to talk about it earlier, but since our schedules were a little screwy, so when I look at the org chart, I'm just a bit confused. Under leading and learning, We've got the 55 elementary, so that's all of the elementaries. Then we have elementary programs. There's something under the, but this, is that the existing, or this, is this the new? There's two. So there's the one that just replaced Lynn Spadaccini, and this will be a new one. And then there's our coordinators. Do they fall into that program as well? Do they fall in there? Just as a curiosity. So under elementary programs, even though you have a new job description, underneath that I actually have 5 jobs, and they're going to be 2 of them with the elementary director title and 3 of them as coordinators? No. 2 coordinators. Okay. Okay. And then just to be a little more confused, where do the resource teachers fall under here? Do I see them here? No. I can't hear you.
You can come up to the mic. The resource teachers are in the organization. I mean, there are a litany of employees who, all employees are represented by this organizational structure. So there are a number of them who are in the organization but not really called out in this document. They're here, but Ms. Klein can provide more.
They would fall, the current elementary resource teachers would fall out under the elementary programs. And the high school resource teachers will fall under the middle high school programs. Am I correct?
You are correct.
I was just a little confused on that. It wasn't real clear. And I have to say, over and Dr. Blackburn and I talked about this today, my biggest concern about this is that the communication on how we are going to not tell our employees about this, but how our employees are going to know who to talk to under this new structure needs to be really crystal clear. It needs to be accurate. And my biggest fear is that there are so many moving parts here that we may miss some important things. And I'm just concerned about that we make sure that the communication of, you used to talk to this person and now you talk to this person. All this change will be made over the summer, so they'll be working on what it looks like till like July 1, making those changes, correct me if I'm wrong, and then school's going to start. And so we just need to make sure that when school starts, if a principal, assistant principal, teacher, somebody needs something, they know exactly where in this new view of the world they talk to.
I would hope Dr. Blackburn has already thought about all of that.
Yes, sir, we're on it.
Thank you. Okay. And I'm good with that.
Another quick question, and I know the media and publications coordinator, when looking at that job and the marketing outreach and the assistant superintendent of government and community relations, there seems to be a lot of overlap on those job descriptions. Is there a reason for that?
What, can you be more specific? What overlap? So you're talking 2 existing jobs and the one that we're bringing forward today. So what overlap
Right.
are we discussing?
We have, you know, working with the schools and district offices for effective media relations. The other one does this, establishes communications between schools, offices, departments. So there seems like there's a lot of duplicate, or maybe I just don't understand the job descriptions.
Mrs. Henderson, what were the 2 that you were referencing? I'm sorry, I caught that. I know the first one is the media and publications, but what was the other one?
Marketing outreach supervisor and
Well, that's not in our current, that's not in the current, they've already been done.
Do you know which previous job description she was just mentioning? One is yours, so I'll help you out. One is yours, and the other one belongs to, is it Ms. Deborah
Marjorie
Foley?
Deborah Foley.
And then the new one that's on here. So I believe the question is, there appears to be, according to Mrs. Henderson, correct me if I'm wrong, overlap between yours, Ms. Foley, and the new one being presented.
I would agree. There are, in many of our job descriptions, there are some overlaps of duties. And our former area officers, our coordinators often did many of the same duties as the area superintendent would do. There is an extensive amount of writing now that takes place with the various mediums that we use. 3 years ago, we didn't even produce any publications. And so the volume of the writing that has to be done, as well as the volume of the number of media contacts that we get, and with me taking a focus more on some of the community engagement, growing the community engagement and government relations, instead of rehiring an accounting specialist and the parent liaison position, we felt that our department would work better if we had somebody dedicated to handling those first line of media contents. You get those morning reports every morning. They continue to grow, and to handle some of those first level media contacts, as well as laying out all of our publications, soliciting materials, or writing the materials. It's becoming extensive.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Anybody else? Are we okay with the fact that there is some redundancy because multiple people are going to be working on similar things, communications, community relations, advertising, business partnership, things of that nature? Okay. Unless we have some changes or suggestions, we need a motion on this item.
Move to approve.
Anybody care to second that?
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Henderson, second by Mrs. Belford for item F18, new organizational chart. Any further discussion? Let's vote. We need some faster computers. Is it John again? At least he's got the fix down pat. 5-0, okay.
Okay, I have the next ones, which are freezers. And I sent an email to all of you yesterday, and I got the response back today. So you know my concerns on this. The cost of the construction manager for each project is essentially the cost of the freezer in each building. Did you get the same copy of the email? And Dane, is there a rush on this? Can it come back at the next meeting?
Mrs. Nisi, I believe that we're trying to put this in place for the summer. I believe that we need approval today to order the equipment and put the contractor under contract to start his process. Sure. Yes.
I find the construction manager's fees excessive.
Well, if I may, the construction manager, first of all, it is impossible to not leverage our internal resources, our management resources, to do enough projects without hiring contracted management services. It's normal and appropriate for all school districts to do that. If you look at one of the F-29 projects, they're about $100,000. The cost of the freezer itself is about $50,000, 49 or so. The construction manager is charging about $6,000 as a fee. He's charging about $12,000 or $13,000 to put a full-time superintendent, which is our requirement for safety and coordination with the school, on the site for about 3 weeks. Those are all actual costs at the end of the project. Those costs have been pre-audited by an accounting firm, Carriggs and Ingram, to ensure us that the costs that they're putting in there are their actual costs for their personnel, their phones, their vehicles. So when they put, the only thing that we're negotiating at this point then is time. And we look at the end of the project, the actual time that they spend. So what we're actually paying there is about $18,000 to have somebody execute the project for us on a $100,000 project.
I guess the question is then, when I compare the rate per week to what it was for, say, the tank removal that's on another one, the cost was very different. Because when I looked at the tank removal, the tank, the one that was another project, was $2,000 per week. But then when I looked at this one, it was $3,192. It looked like to me what they did was they had a certain dollar amount they wanted things to cost, and then they just worked backwards to get what the cost.
No, ma'am. What they do is they put on there a full-time superintendent, which is I think it's roughly, they have several. They range from about $43 actual cost to about $47. They're putting on there 50 because they don't know which one they're going to use, and we'll back out to the actual cost at the end of the project. Happens on every project. They have in there a week of a project manager to do the paperwork. That's about $3,000 for the week. Correct.
I saw that they charged per week.
Correct.
But I saw that on different projects, the cost per week was different when I looked at different projects on different items down through each one.
They were consistent for, unless I'm mistaken, but they should be and will be at the end of the project, but I'm certain that they were, I'm fairly certain that they were consistent for the project management cost, because it's effectively the same project manager. That same project manager will run all 4 or 5 of those projects. So he, if he spends 3 days on his time card on a specific project, running the paperwork, making sure the money flows for that company, putting in their pay requests, we will end up paying that. But that project manager is around $3,000 a week.
So if 2 projects are running at the same time, are we double
There are
billed?
5 projects running at the same time. If they're going to run simultaneously, and remember, we only have so much time to do these in the summer, they have different superintendents. One project manager can run 4 or 5 projects for them. And he will only charge us for the time he spends on that project.
That's not how the billing's laid out.
That is a guaranteed maximum price. We pay them on actuals. As a matter of fact, what you used to see were board items that had change orders, a negative $832 change order or $1,832 change order that would come before you regularly. We do those as small change orders under 10% at this point.
So how do we ensure if it's one person and they spend a week, how do we ensure that they don't charge a week here and a week, they charge us a week at each place? Because it looks like that it would be easy to bill that way because we're approving at all sites.
You're approving a guaranteed maximum price. We look at the pay cards for the project. Sue, do you want to? Sorry.
I'm aware of that one, and there's also a few others.
To me, it looks like a great deal. We're paying somebody $3,000 a week to oversee a project. I've got 5 projects, so I'm going to put in $3,000 for each project, even though I did them all the same week.
Yes, ma'am, and we're aware of that. This contractor and several others are doing multiple jobs for the district, and so we've talked with our staff when our billing comes in. That's one of the things we're going to make sure isn't happening. we don't believe it's going to happen, but we will actually check that Mr. Smith was on this job for this number of hours, Mr. Smith was on this job for X number of hours, and if Mr. Smith is getting over 40 hours, then that's a problem, and we'll be talking with our vendor about that, as well as our own folks who do some job site verification. They'll be documenting who's on the job at what time, so we're going to be looking very closely at that because we do have a lot going on this summer, and we do have several vendors that have multiple jobs going and have not identified the exact person that will be staffing that job yet. So that is something we'll be looking for.
Okay, I would just like to reiterate what I said in my email, is that we seem to have a lot of project managers back in your area, and we have a lot of projects going on, and we're spending a lot of money on construction managers. It just seems like a great job to have, and I don't understand why we don't find a better way to do this. Because to see a $100,000 project and half of it go for fees makes no sense to me.
Mrs. Nisi, it is not half going for fees. There is some actual subcontracted work and costs for dumpsters and other hard construction items. The fee for the project, the profit that this contractor will make is $6,000.
And you tell me that, but I'm saying if I'm John Q. Public and I pull up this item, looking at it, if I looked at it, just the bottom line, it shows that the freezer is 49,000, whatever, and it says the construction manager, whatever, is getting 48, 50,000. I would look at that.
Yes, ma'am, but there's a detail sheet in there that tells them exactly what their costs are for their personnel, what their costs are for their ancillary costs like phones and their profit. It's a line item that says $6,000. The rest of it is hard costs. They're going to have expenses that they're going to pay somebody to do site work, to pour a slab, to do the groundwork for the dumpster. Those are costs to them. The construction manager's profit on this job is $6,000. It's a detailed line item sheet on there. If somebody were to construe it as to be they're getting $48,000, they will cycle through $48,000. They will pay their costs and they will make a profit of $6,000.
And you said this was audited, that these costs are audited, so we know that they're accurate.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the project, Sue.
These contracts are under our continuing services contracts, which their rates were pre-audited. So the rates that they'll be charging are based on the audited rates that were verified by our auditor. These jobs are too small to be post-construction audited. So we're using the rates that were verified previously by CRI.
Okay.
And we will verify time. When we have situations like this, and we normally do, where there are multiple jobs going on by a contractor and he has a project manager, we simply ask for their time cards to verify that. As I said, you've seen dozens of small change orders come through over the years where we're getting back $1,000 or $2,000.
I just want, it just seems a very easy system for someone to take advantage of. And I want to make real sure, because you just got through saying we're doing this because we're shorthanded. And so, well, we don't have the staff to be doing it. So if we don't have the staff to be doing it, then I question, do we have the staff to be checking to make sure that people are where they are? I have a lot of questions about how we're really going to be on top of this. And I've been here long enough through the years is that this is where we had our problems years ago. And I just want to make sure that the safety, the checks and balances are there so the problems we had in years past don't crop up again. That's all I'm saying.
Anybody else have any comments on any of this?
I would just say that, and I've had numerous conversations with Sue and Dane both on questions on this process, And I do think that we absolutely need to keep it top of mind moving forward and make sure that we're looking at all of those intricacies of that process. Because there is so much there. And, you know, even looking at, I look at these all the time and I think, why in the world it seems like we are just purging money. For example, the project manager at $31.93 per week, that comes out if he works 52 weeks or she works 52 weeks, $166,000 per year. Mentally, I just can't understand why we couldn't hire someone to do that job within the $166,000. So I think public perception, especially with all of the work that we're doing in this area, we have to be very careful, we have to be very transparent, and we have to make sure that we are absolutely being as efficient as we can be with those processes, because I think there's a lot of room for trouble there. But
Just a second. I understand your point, and I understand that if we have somebody, we're contracting somebody to do a specific type of work over a long period of time, it'd be more efficient to have that person on staff. So I guess the question you're asking, or the suggestion you're making, is that maybe we should analyze, or staff should analyze, if we would benefit, if there'll be enough foreseeable work to add, I don't know how many positions to your staff, so that this perception doesn't unfold in the future. I suspect, though, that there's probably not enough foreseeable work for a full-time person, but I believe that's what you're referring to.
yes, and that's been part of the conversations that we have had, is that we don't want to bring someone on short-term, because then we have the liability of maintaining that staff person. So
Correct.
I do, however, believe that we need to continue to look for efficiencies in the process and the way that we're approaching things as we move
Understood.
forward.
Mrs. Nisi?
See, I forget, this is part of the problem of being around for too long. I forget there's enough new people around here. The comment you made this morning, Dr. Blackburn, about history, myths, and legends, or whatever. See, there's enough new people now. The comments I was alluding to earlier, for you newbies now that have been around here, that years ago we had issues in construction and maintenance, was because the accounting, all the process, and Dane, you were here at that time, was because all of that was handled in-house, if I recall. A lot of the paperwork was done within your own department. We didn't have a checks and balances, or was that even before your time?
I'm not familiar with which instance you're referring to.
The dumpster, well, no, I was even before your time.
Dumpster was never an issue.
No, dumpster, but God, just maybe even before your time.
Yes.
Years ago, in a galaxy far away, we had issues with vendors and payments and tracking some of that.
Yes, ma'am. I can.
Maybe 2006,
Yeah,
2008?
Yes, I can say that occurred in maintenance.
Okay.
That had nothing to do with the project management of any of those
There were some
projects.
questions, and part of it was because how we tracked those things.
I don't believe it was an error of omission. I believe it was an error of commission at that point, and I believe.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree. But we have in processes in place that we don't have everything happening in the same department now. And so I'm assuming that is in place for this, is that there are checks and balances in terms of when hours come in, how things are paid out. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So for our new people across the back who are wondering what I'm referring to, this is some of the new information and why people question some of these hours and purchases and legends, myths, and fables that we were talking about this morning. So, okay, I wanted to check on some of that. Thank you. I'm old. I need to go away.
I'm going to bite my tongue and not jump in on that comment. Mr. Craig?
Just want to ask real quick, under our omnibus continuing service contract type vehicles, is profit pre-negotiated and a line item on each of those, depending, and if they are, is it based on the actual service, or is it just based on the contract, the way the contract, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. I'll answer that. Under the continuing services contract, they are solicited on a qualifications base so that we, by statute, that we must select them based on qualifications. We establish on the design or professional services a uniform fee, so that the only thing then that you are negotiating for a specific project is how much time they're going to spend.
Great.
On the construction projects, there is a sliding scale as a suggestion, I guess, that gives them the smaller the project, the larger the fee, to make sure that they have interest in even working for us at that point. As the project gets larger, the fee goes down, but we negotiate the fee every time. And the hours. Did I confuse you with that answer?
Up until you said you negotiate the fee every time. I thought you said it under the omnibus, or under the...
No, under the professional services for design,
Okay.
where they're establishing an hourly rate. We establish uniform hourly rates among all of that type, either civil engineers or architects. For the contractors, which would be the construction managers or the design builders, we have a suggested scale for their fee, which varies. And what we negotiate is, in fact, where that fee falls for that particular project and the amount of time, or what we call general conditions, for them to staff that job, so that if they were to say, for instance, we believe that we want our superintendent on there for 5 weeks, we would say, no, that's only a 3-week project, so we're only going to allow you in your guaranteed maximum price 3 weeks, and then we would verify that.
Got it.
Anybody else? I would suggest that since we're going to see more of these, if any board members want to understand it in more depth, since none of us are experts on how this works, that we get with staff and understand it a little deeper at another time other than now. If you're good, would you like to make a motion on F-28?
Sure, I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second on F-28?
Second.
Mr. Craig joins the game. First by Mrs. Nisi, second by Mrs. Craig. Any further conversation? Mr. Did I say? It's getting late. What Mrs. Nisi say? She's old. I'm old too, and I'm getting tired. No, that's fine. Let's vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. 4, yes. Then it won't come up automatically. And I guess actually since she was, does then that become an abstain vote, which is a yes vote? I don't know how that works because she was part of the meeting. And by the way, her daughter had a event that she had to attend.
No, let the record should reflect that, mention reflect that she left. The meeting was excused, and it was be a 4-0 vote.
So it'll be a 4-0. Very good. Okay, and Mrs. Nisi, F-29.
To approve F-29.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Nisi, second by Mrs. Belford. Any conversation, discussion? Hearing none, please vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? 4-0. Okay. That moves us on to information agenda. Information or action? I'm sorry, action. Action agenda, Dr. Blackburn.
Yes, sir. There are 2 items for your consideration. First is item G34, which is purchasing solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Nisi, second by Mrs. Belford. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Let's do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Next is item G35, which is department school-initiated agreements.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Nisi and Mrs. Belford. Any discussion? Voice voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 4-0. Okay, that'll move us on to information agenda, which includes items for the board review and will be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Blackburn?
There are 11 items under the information category.
Any board member wish to discuss any informational items? Is it 37 first? Yes, F37. Oh, you want to let me start it? Yeah. Okay. I want to chime in. You want to chime in. Put me on odds. I like that way. You want to pull it and I get to discuss it. That works out pretty conveniently. Okay, this is our dental services, which the board has determined that our current contractor is not providing the level of service that we want. So our consultant has gone out to negotiate with vendors and bring us back some options. It was reduced down to 3, Delta Dental, Cigna, and MetLife. And on this one, the Superintendent's Insurance Advisory Committee is bringing us a recommendation of going with Cigna. And I am bringing this item to conversation because I believe there's more to this than just that recommendation. As we actually discussed in our workshop earlier today, that the culture of this organization has been bringing one recommendation forward when there might be different thoughts even by staff, which I believe even in this case. And at one point in time, I believe there was even a difference of opinion on who it should be awarded to by our consultant. And so I think we should have a little conversation about the different thoughts and recommendations. I'll state right off of the bat that while I understand the logic and the recommendation of Cigna, one of the schools of thought by, I believe, the SAIC was the fact that Cigna is offering a $1 discount on our ASO fees, which Cigna manages our health plan, and they charge us per employee per month a fee. And they're offering us a $1 reduction in that monthly fee per employee per month, which is about $80,000 in our pocket. My concern on that is several-fold. My first concern is that with reference to Delta, they have stated clearly that there are no lab fees on the back side, unexpected expenses for our employees who take this voluntary insurance. So our employees are paying for this insurance, we are not, yet we would reap $80,000 of savings in our pocket. My concern is that with Cigna and with MetLife, there are some lab fees on the backside, and I'm concerned that the lab fees could exceed the $80,000 that we're going to get in our pocket, and I don't want to in any way, shape, or form be construed that we're getting money out of the pockets of our employees because they're paying for it in the long run, and that whole concept bothers me. So that's one concern about that. The other concern is that I believe, and Mr. Langdorf, you can correct me if I'm wrong, does our ASO contract expire the end of 2017? Because if we have only 1 year on our contract, then the $1 savings is only good for a year until we renegotiate our healthcare contract.
I think I need to go, obviously I didn't bring that contract, but I believe our ASO contract with Cigna goes through 2019.
I thought it was only a 3-year.
Negotiated last year. And
we have,
it's a 3-year plus 2 additional, so it actually could be up to 5 years.
Could be up to 5 years.
Right.
Okay, because that would only be all right, because that savings is only good as long as that contract is good. But again, I do have an issue with the perception of us benefiting from an insurance plan that we are not paying for, but our employees are, and may cost them more in the long run through lab fees. And so that's a concern of mine.
Sure.
And Mr. Langdorf, while you're up there, and to bring everybody, I think the board's aware of this, but the Superintendent's Insurance Advisory Committee met several times on this topic. At the second meeting, you and I spoke outside while they were doing their voting, and I asked you your thoughts. And I believe at that time you said your thoughts were, at that time, MetLife. Is that correct?
They were when you and I discussed that, yeah.
Okay. Can you speak to us as to what your thoughts are at this point in time, and if they change, why they change?
As far as a change is concerned, any one of these providers is terrific. I'm not going to say, because any one of them is terrific. The reason why I liked MetLife after their presentation was, if you look at the comparisons, and I provided you with Willis's analysis, under the DHMO plan, their pricing was lower than the other two altogether, and the PPO pretty much matched. The difference was their premium was a bit higher. And in fact, their premium for the DHMO is about 14, I think it's 14.5% higher. And that, you know, that would be the difference if there was the two between Cigna and the other. The problem is hard to quantify what those additional lab fees are going to be, because we don't know what those lab fees are going to be. Solstice, from what I understand, cannot provide us with a list of how many lab fees were put into existence. So it's hard for us to do that sort of justification.
I understand that, and all we could do is possibly project based on the number of claims that have potential lab fees on the back end and what that amounts to.
Right.
And my concern is that the relevant perceived savings is going to be significantly less than the back end expenses of lab fees, which is the point that I brought up several years ago when we were between Delta and Solstice. I was very concerned about that, and Solstice said, oh, no, that's not a concern, and I lost on that 4-1, and it turns out I was right, that was a big expense. We had a lot of employees that are complaining about those lab fees. Huge expenses on the backside unexpectedly.
Sure.
I'm very concerned about that even going forward. And as I understand it, Delta's the only one that has no lab fees with only one exception, and that's a very serious reconstruction, I think, of which rarely ever happens.
And what you're talking about is with those additional services. I kind of printed out a color copy for me because my secretary printed it black and white, and I can't really read it too well, but let me pull this out here. When it comes to the PPO plan, they were all pretty much the same, you know, as far as what they were offering. Cigna was a little bit better than our current when it comes to the maximum, the plan year per maximum, or plan year maximums, because they came in at $1,650 starting their first year, whereas our current is $1,500, so they came a little bit higher. Delta Dental was at $1,250, so they were lower, or they matched basically what Solstice had, and MetLife came in at better because their first year maximum was $1,750. And this is strictly just for the PPO plan. Cigna matched when it comes to implants. They do provide them, whereas Delta didn't. If you looked at this particular, I don't know if you can see that from here. Everything in green represents a better pricing. Everything in the orange represents a pricing that's higher than our existing. That's for the PPO plan. When it comes to the DHMO plan, it would be the same. So if you did the comparisons, that's in orange would be higher than our current. That's in green is better than current. As far as the fees are concerned, it really depends on what type of metal is being used on the Cigna plan compared to what Delta Dental's are. for Cigna, if you were to have a root canal therapy and you had to have a cap put in there, depending on the type of metal used, the fee ranged anywhere from $75 to $150. So if you wanted a titanium cap, that would be higher than what Delta Dental's costs were, because Delta Dental's cost was $395 for that, whereas Cigna's varied from $270 plus a fee varying between $75 and $150. So depending on the type of metal, it could actually be less than what Delta
understand,
was.
but just where I still have a hang-up, as I did 2 years ago, is lab fees. And as I understand it, there are no lab fees with Delta Dental.
Yes, well, they do have some lab fees when there's 6 teeth.
Above 6 teeth.
Right.
But that's almost a medical condition if somebody gets their 6 teeth
I was going to,
busted.
thank you for letting me speak, if I may. My name is Karen.
Not at this, not yet, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Not yet, please. Let the board members speak. Anyways, those are my concerns at this point. We can address them if need be, but I'm still concerned about the expenses on the back side. And just to clarify for our listening audience, that premiums don't necessarily rule the day, a few dollars this way or that way. On our health plan, what really gets us on our health plan are the claims costs on the other side. They're widespread and they're high. And so I have the same concern here. I'm not concerned about a couple dollars this way or that way on a premium. I'm concerned about major expense on the claim side, surprises to our employees. There's really no sweat off our back. We're not paying for this. It's a voluntary service. So I'm very concerned about what's in the best interest of our employees. Mrs. Nisi, you wanted to jump in.
Can I say one more thing on that?
Sure.
I think when I look at what Delta's pricing was compared to Cigna, on the DHMO plan, Cigna's pricing came in at $36,000 less than our current pricing. So I believe what they were trying to do to compensate for that is through a monthly premium that's lower than what Delta has, and that lowering overall represents dollars in the pockets for employee. It really depends on what type of services that they need during any given plan year. Some may need a root canal 1 year, but most of the years they may not need it. And that's why that pricing is there, but they have a reduced premium charge. So I'm assuming their underwriters looked at all of that before they provided that pricing. So technically they're charging less in premium than MetLife and Delta Dental for the DHMO plan.
Mrs. Nisi?
Well, I just wanted to share with board members, I went and sat in with the committee because I wanted to see how they were making their decisions. And I guess this is what I want to share with you, what I got real frustrated with, is that after each committee meeting, I was getting a different response. After one committee meeting, if they would have voted then, we would be sitting here and they'd be telling you, we're going with Delta. After another committee meeting, they said, oh, we're going to go with Cigna. And the criteria, because I would talk with them afterwards, okay, why do you like this company? Why do you like this company? And what they were using for criteria is not the criteria that we're using here tonight. For instance, the reason several of them picked Cigna is because they liked the speaker better. I'll just be real honest with you. Several of the people around the table did not like the Delta speaker. They don't trust him and they think he's slimy, so we shouldn't go with Delta. And I'm just being real honest with you, and that's why they didn't go with him last time, is because they didn't think they could, they thought he gave a bad presentation, and that was why they recommended against him. And I'm like, okay, is that really what we want to base our decision on? I'm just being real honest with you guys. I had 3 of the people around the table said they really didn't care because they don't take the dental product, the dental insurance. They're going to just use FSA anyway, and so they're just going to go by bottom line price. I mean, they looked at all the information, but they're never going to use the product. So that was a little concerning to me. I mean, they put their time into it, but that was concerning to me. The rating sheet concerned me, and Mark, I appreciate the time you put into it, but you and I talked about that rating sheet. If you look at the rating sheet, every item on the rating sheet had equal weight. Well, that was troubling to me because we have more people that use, for instance, PPO. I think it's like 75% use that than they do another type, but it had equal weight in terms of looking at cost than something else. You know, he just got through talking about, well, Cigna covers implants. Well, you need to understand what that really means. All of the policy, I learned more about dental insurance. I feel like during that week, it was just like we talked about dental. I learned more about teeth in the same, nothing personal here, guys. I talked about teeth that week as much as I talked about restrooms. I mean, it was just like I lived and breathed teeth that week, but there is a cap on how much you can spend on your insurance. Well, implants are very, very expensive. So yes, Cigna says they cover implants, but only up to that dollar amount. So it may say they cover implants, but it's only going to cover up to a certain amount. So that's not even going to cover one implant. I mean, you're going to reach that cap and you're done. And so the other thing that it doesn't take into consideration, I started calling dentists and asked, because one of the things that people are not happy with Solstice is, and one of the things Karen mentioned, is dentists are not getting paid. So I went around and asked, well, you know, which of the providers do you have the best, you know, who do you never have problems with? Who, you know, how quickly are you getting list front, that sort of thing. You know, I wanted to get that sort of feedback. And, you know, that information is all very important, and so that wasn't a part of that either. And so, you know, so I guess that I think needs to be a part of our discussion, because one of the things that the people at the table didn't seem to be very important that I heard as a board member is that if you, all of those new providers, you have to be on a list to get service. And in some parts of our county, that is an issue. Now, the people at the table said it's never an issue. They said, oh, there's a dentist, you know, everybody has a dentist within a block of them. Well, there are some parts of the county I do think that's still a problem. And so, you know, I want to make sure, whether you're up in Titusville or down in Micco, that you have access to a dentist. And so there were some differences in the providers there. And so I feel we need to have some discussion there, and I don't believe everybody that voted took all of those things into account. And because the employee is paying the whole premium on this, I want to make sure that whatever we choose, that we as board members look at all of those angles. That's why I sat in on every meeting. I looked at every single plan, policy, and every option. And so I actually support a different one than what the committee brings. I actually support Delta as opposed to Cigna. And I'll be happy to go into why, but I'm not going to support Cigna for a variety of reasons.
Anybody else have any input, thoughts?
I just have one question. It's my understanding that the vote or the tabulation of the committee's desires was not done the same day as the presentations. Is that true?
We had two different, because the first took so long, we brought them back a second time, and we brought them back for their oral presentations. So they listened to all three providers the first time. We brought them back again, and this was the time that they can discuss what they heard at the first presentation.
Okay, thanks.
It's not uncommon in a procurement process to do that.
I didn't say it was. I was just asking how the procedure went. Thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Belford, do you have anything to add before I make another comment?
Well, I will most certainly say that I'm not comfortable saving $80,000 and letting it cost our employees additional money. That really does not sit well with me. I think there are a lot of ways that we can look at that. You know, it's been brought up in the past. Why do we not provide some benefit for dental? And I think that gets into a very lengthy discussion. My concern is in those hidden fees, the lab fees, because it's exactly the same thing that we saw with Solstice, that and dentists not getting paid. And I'm not sure that the information that has been put before us clearly addresses either of those issues. And Mr. Langdorf, I know I had emailed you and you sent me some information on that, and there is some breakdown here. But I would be most curious to see, okay, what are the 10 most common procedures that people would have that are going to have lab fees and associated, and how does that compare between the 4 companies to see what it is that we can really expect that our employees are going to be paying out of pocket? Because I think since we're not contributing to this, we really have a responsibility to ensure that we're making a decision that is not going to cost our employees in the long run, especially unanticipated costs. I can certainly justify $2 or $3 more per month for their dental insurance, and they can budget that if I know that they're not going to pay $3,000 out of pocket for costs that they're not anticipating.
I'll just say that I think that all 3 companies that are on the table right now are first-rate companies, and I don't think the issue of payment to the dentist is going to be an issue, so I discount that completely. One other thing to point out for, I believe the board's aware, and for those that are listening, so Delta did also offer a potential dental services inside. We're looking at doing our own healthcare centers, and they're looking at no cost to the district putting those services into the healthcare center. Not that they would be free services, or even a mobile service going to schools, providing cleanings to employees, or something, or some services to employees. That would be at no cost to the district. It would be a fee-based service or covered by insurance as appropriate, just like any other dental service. I see that as an additional benefit to be offering employees. How well utilized that would be, I don't know, but since there's no cost to the district, that would be on Delta as to whether or not it was a fruitful venture for them to do that. So the risk is all on them. There's no risk on the district, and again, it's an access to dental services, convenient access is an additional benefit to employees. So I too, actually, at this point, I'm leaning towards Delta for those reasons, and most strongly, I just have an issue with the perception of getting money in our pocket that may be coming out of our employees' pocket, and again, the surprises for lab fees. Mr. Langdorf, if you want to run an analysis of utilization or of claims over the past couple of years that have potential of lab fees, and we could see what that looks like, and you think that you can discount that as a cost concern on the backside, I'll entertain it. But right now, without that factual data, I'm very concerned about those surprises again. Mrs. Nisi.
Well, and the possibilities with a mobile clinic, I know, Mr. Craig, you've talked about wanting to do more for our employees. The idea of what we could do with as opposed to a stationary, I picture, they showed me the idea of a mobile clinic, the ideas of not only taking it to our employees, but when it wasn't being used, the idea of taking it into some of the neighborhoods that need services. My mind was going on all the things we could do with that and how it could be used, and that was at their cost, but working with us. And granted, that's secondary to what we need in terms of insurance, but the idea of providing insurance plus having this benefit. And the other thing I like, Delta, that's all they do is dental insurance. It's not secondary. And all I go on is past practice. I know when I had Delta as an insurance, and yeah, I keep bringing back, I've been the one here that's been around far too long, but when I had it as insurance, I know it got paid, I knew what my bill was, and I didn't have a problem. And my dentist didn't have a problem. All the issues came up when we switched. And I guess that's the other thing. And I'd like to, I've heard that from a lot of people, and I heard that from my own dentist office when I went back and asked them about this.
Mrs. Belford?
I just have a quick question. I'm looking at the table again, and I guess I missed it the initial time that I was looking at it, but it looks as though Cigna is claiming that they have 3,105 dentists in Brevard County.
That's what they provided us, yes.
They duplicate, I question that they duplicate counted, and they included other counties around. There's not that many dentists here.
That's what I was thinking, because
The
that would be
other
like
zip codes,
an
and
enormous
that's-
amount of our population would be dentists.
They're wrong.
Okay.
The last thing I wanted to add to the conversation, and let our listening audience know that the school district and the county commission worked together on our previous contract for healthcare with Cigna. And in teaming up with them, Cigna offered us a very nice savings between both sides of the street here of somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million because we worked together with the county. The county has eyes on our intention to move forward with our own healthcare centers, and we're hoping that they're going to jump in on that and offer it as a benefit to their employees also. They have Delta Dental, so if we do the healthcare centers jointly with the county and we do Delta Dental and put the dental in our healthcare centers, then their employees, and by the way, we cover about 13,000 lives, they cover about 12,000 lives, then we could have a much larger impact and benefit and savings to all the government employees in Brevard County. So we're thinking a lot larger when we're talking about things than just us. So that being said, I don't have any further questions at this time, and staff, of course, is, Dr. Blackburn, staff is, of course, welcome to bring whatever recommendation they want to us, and then the board will deliberate and decide which direction they want to go. And I'm sorry, but we're not entertaining vendor comments at this point in time. Mr. Blackburn, Dr. Blackburn, I'm sorry.
I've been called worse. No, what I just wanted to, Mr. Langdorf, you mentioned earlier that after the MetLife conversation, you did have an opinion, and at that time, your opinion was MetLife. You and I debriefed in anticipation of this board meeting after you had all of the information and after you went through your own analysis. You had, so independent of the advisory committee, you had a recommendation you shared with me and logic behind it. Could you share that recommendation you shared with me and the logic behind it?
Sure. From my point of view, and I like MetLife, but I didn't like the increase in premium. So from that point of view, after you and I talked, Mr. Ziegler, I went back and looked at that, and I didn't like the increase in premium. I did recommend to the superintendent we consider Cigna, and the reason why I did is because they reduced the DHMO fee by $36,000. And I understand the idea of taking $80,000. One thing that everybody needs to understand about insurance in Florida is you cannot rebate people. So in other words, you cannot rebate somebody commission because it's against the law. I think what Cigna was offering with the $80,000 is the cost of ASO reduction, because it's not a rebate on their dental plan. It's a reduction of ASO fee because that would compensate for their whatever commissions they would pay if we were paying a broker to receive that commission. So I believe that's, and Brian can't tell me that that's true, but I'm assuming that's what the $80,000 is. That's why they could reduce our ASO fee. It's not a rebate to our people buying the dental program. The reason why I like the $80,000 is we could then utilize those dollars to offset some of our costs if we start a clinic, if you allow us to move forward with the clinic. And my thought is we could take that $80,000 to offset what it's going to cost to build our modular unit. And from my point of view, it was a good way of spending dollars that would benefit people, not only in the dental, but also we're providing a different service on clinics. And that's why I would recommend that.
And I appreciate that thought, but our consultant showed us that those healthcare centers are going to have a return on investment within probably about a year's worth of time to make it worth the investment. I don't think we're too concerned about that at this time. Anybody else have any further questions on this informational item?
Just to say that if it pleases the board, we can take the comments and the questions and concerns that were aired this evening, go back, do more research on these questions and concerns, and provide some written follow-up to the board in addition to when the recommendation comes back for the board to deliberate on.
That'd be fine.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
If we're going to have follow-up, I have an additional question that I would appreciate clarification on. On the table that we have here, it appears as though we are highlighting MetLife plan year maximum in green, but it doesn't necessarily look like we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges here. So if you look under Delta Dental, the plan year maximum is $1,250, but that one states that preventative exams, x-rays, cleanings don't count toward that. So I'm curious, what, if we compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, what numbers are we truly looking at? I'm assuming that $1,750 of MetLife includes preventative things.
This table was actually put together by each one of the carriers. So they were provided with a definition of what those entail, and they listed that. So this was not something that Willis or myself put in there. They are the ones who answered that question. I don't know if you can imply that from the others, because we didn't ask that question, does that include your cleanings and other things?
So that would be a clarification that I would appreciate as we
Okay.
move forward, to know, are we in fact talking about the same thing, or, so does the MetLife $1,750 include the cost of preventative type things? Just so, it's difficult in looking at it this way, and I appreciate the way that you got to this information. It was the vendors themselves, but it would be very helpful for me in determining how we move forward to make sure that I'm looking at consistent information across the board so I can compare more effectively.
I'll get that clarification for you. Thank you.
While you're here. Might as well get all the mileage out of you we
Sure.
can, right?
Might as well.
Next item is, and anybody else have anything on the dental? Okay, is H38 is our short-term disability and our long-term disability. I'll be honest, I haven't fully digested the options there, but I will say also here we're being offered a discount on our ASO fees. Again, I just conceptually have a problem with how that's perceived. I rather see our employees with lower premiums than us netting $80,000 in our pocket. And since these are not, there was not a bid on these items, just so the audience is clear, these are negotiated by a broker and then brought to us. It's not a bid item. I would like to see if there's somehow a way to work that into a better deal for our employees and bring that back to us. Again, I think the board concurs that we don't like the perception of us benefiting out of our employees' voluntary insurance services.
I can certainly see, like I say, I think the process of the 80,000 was, you can't rebate the employee
understand that.
for their commissions.
Just doesn't sit right with us.
Sure, okay.
But don't want to throw that savings away either if it can somehow benefit our employees. I don't know if there's a way to structure that, but I think you all understand the concerns.
The difference between the two, from my point of view, the pricing difference was about almost $11,000, but it gave a 3-year price guarantee, whereas Reliance, who had a lower rate by $11,000, was a 2-year price guarantee. So I can certainly go back and see if they'll do anything, but the difference there is a 2-year price guarantee versus a 3-year price guarantee if you went with Cigna.
I saw that. Anyways, if you could look into that.
Sure.
Bring that back. Anybody else have a comment on that item or another informational item? Huh? You agree? Okay. Very good. Then in that case, we will move on to additional public presentations. And we will continue. We have 5 speakers left. We will start with Phil Andrews, followed by Paul Rosberry, and then Autumn Montecalvo. I probably messed that up. Is Phil Andrews in the house? Phil Andrews left. Paul Rosberry, are you in the house? All right. Thank you for hanging in there through our business. I appreciate that.
Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I'm representing the South Brevard Ministerial Association with the comment tonight, and this is in regard to the bathroom issue. The bathroom access issue seems to have evolved from an anti-harassment issue of rules or guidelines into a civil rights issue. It's been noted in other communities where the gender and gay rights issue have been implemented in Maryland and in some surrounding communities around D.C. that children are now harassed if they are not professing to be gay or lesbian, and just professing, not that they're actually practicing. Now, it's become apparent that in our current federal administration has an agenda in regard to this issue. This is evident in the North Carolina and the Department of Justice suits recently filed. It appears that there's a court battle which may settle the issue once it reaches the Supreme Court. This will most likely continue into the next administration. The issue now is the threat of withholding of federal funds from those schools, colleges, municipalities if the agenda is not implemented or they do not comply. This would lead one to conclude that our freedom is based on money from the federal government, which our local schools need to fulfill their mission. The question now is how much federal government domination will we tolerate, not only on our local school system, but also in the educational intrusion and direction which we have in teaching our children. In other words, who is our school board working for? The question is the citizens who elected them, or the government who seems to be intimidating them. We believe that we need to stand together as a community to stand against anything that's intruding this school board. We are American citizens, and in the past there have been many intimidations and ruling governments that have caused revolts against domination and taxation without representation, and it appears that we may be approaching a similar issue once again. If we are a community, we as a community cannot maintain our sovereignty through electing our local school board to perform their duty, then we are surely headed for anarchy and dictatorship. Let us stand for freedom and self-government. I would suggest that we table the issue until the courts decide, but if that's not a possible solution, I offer one to you. A solution to the bathroom issue would be to enclose every commode and shower with a floor-to-ceiling privacy wall, where only one person may enter and accomplish their personal tasks. Install cameras in the common area to ensure safety and monitor that only one person enters a given person's stall or shower. No
Thank you.
undressing in the common area.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Autumn. Help me with your last name, please.
You said it right. It's Montecalvo.
Montecalvo. And next up will be Bob Llewellyn.
All right. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Autumn Montecalvo. I'm a mother of 4, and I am also a youth leader in this community. I get to see our children on a daily basis, not just in a safe, protected place. And I see real issues of things that are going on with students. And I'm the one that they call at 3 a.m. when they're dealing and struggling with things. I bring a unique perspective because I was raised in the public school system, and I came from a very abusive home as a young child. So I understand that a public school is a place for safety. That's where I went when I was a child. My home was not a safe place to be. And so my public school and my teachers were the ones, were the ones that were there to protect me. And that was a place that I felt secure and safe. And I feel that if this agenda passes, that maybe that our students won't feel secure and safe because they'll be pushed and forced in a direction that maybe as kids from a young age are very impressionable. And I see that. We had a wonderful display today about a spotlight on education where our public schools are enforcing good behaviors and good things. And I see that as such a great thing for our public school system. But I fear that if we push this agenda on students that are very impressionable, that their decisions on who they are becoming later on in life will be affected, and they won't know what's right from wrong. And our Constitution states that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But are we truly offering them life? And are we truly offering them liberty and happiness in pushing something on them that maybe they don't understand or maybe that they're unsure of? I really feel that this issue, there's been many people saying the laws and sorry, I'm not a very good speaker. My husband is the head youth pastor, but I deal with all the girls and all the issues that there, so I usually do it on a one-on-one basis. I'm not normally in front of a public crowd, but just gather my thoughts. That this issue for young girls, I have 2 boys and 2 girls ranging from 11 to 3, and I see that what can be influenced on the children for public education and what can push them to further their education. So I vote no on your anti-discrimination policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob? Come on up, Bob. Next will be Gary. I'm going to guess it's Montecalvo also. There's no V in the name, but I'm pretty sure I'll be right. Go ahead, Bob.
Hi, I'm addressing you because I am trying to protect children first and foremost. And I believe we are doing well by reaching you tonight because, frankly, there's a hope among us that what we have said tonight will actually preclude the need for something in 2 weeks. Toward the conclusion of the 426 workshop, one of the board members wondered about the ramifications of the possible language and spoke of what expectations there might be for locker rooms and the possible clash between religious rights and others' rights. And Mr. Ziegler asked, how do we communicate that we care? And the paid advisor said the old-fashioned golden rule, listen to the students. And that's really still the rule. Don't ever stray from that, because it's what Jesus told people to do proactively, to pay it forward, to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And I might add, to your kids. And so if you don't want your children to get exposed to thinking that is contrary to millennia of common sense and natural law and common law, then don't allow things that you in your heart and before God already know aren't right. They're just innately known not to be right. People should read the website by Walt Heyer, H-E-Y-E-R, on sex change regrets. And they should look at Judith Reisman, R-E-I-S-M-A-N-N, her website, who she has exposed the comprehensive sex education agenda that really goes back to Darwin, and then goes to Margaret Sanger with Planned Parenthood, and what has gone on in our country to change the minds of generations of children. And that's where we are today. We're fighting it because of those people. I thank you for your time, and I hope that you'll seriously consider voting no.
Thank you, Bob, and Gary, you're up.
Thank you for including us in this public place, and also allowing us to see what you all do, because we can have a better appreciation for what you sit through and do, and that'll give us a better idea. And I'll try not to be redundant. My name is Gary Montecalvo. I've been a Brevard County resident for 62 years. I've attended Brevard County schools, Mila, Edgewood, Merritt Island High. I love this county, and I'm a concerned citizen. I attended the April 26th morning workshop meeting, and mostly everything I heard discussed that policy and seemed to say that we don't really need this policy. And, you know, I believe both Dr. Blackburn and Mr. Ziegler made those statements, but then at the end felt like we should do it anyway because of the future, that this is the way of the future. And I can't say that I really understood that. I felt like if it's not needed, then it's not needed. So I just would like to say I don't think we should move forward with this. I think principals don't want it from what I've heard. Teachers don't want it. They don't need it. I think the principals, from what I've heard, are handling all of this on their own, and they don't need to have someone else step in if they're doing what they've been put in place to do. And as a citizen, I feel it will be dangerous. It'll increase litigation. It'll cost a lot of money. It has no purpose. And I really feel that it should be dropped so you can get on with all these other things that you seem to have tons of stuff by looking at this agenda. And I ask that you vote no. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, we are now at board member reports and discussion points. In addition to discussion points, I request that board members please include any information requests to be placed on board assigned tasks during this time as well. I would like to start by speaking to you about forgiveness of debt. Actually, it's for AstroTurf Fields, and I'll explain a little more for our audience. I believe our board is aware of this, but at times in history, prior to, I believe, anybody who's been sitting up here, maybe, I'm not sure, but there were some times when schools had some needs that the district was either couldn't afford or wasn't willing to pay for, and the school would engage in maybe a fundraiser, raising some money and asking the district to assist by loaning the school money to accomplish what their goal is. And in this particular example, and there are going to be others that I'm going to ask, and Mrs. Henderson asked if we would bring forward and analyze, but right now the one is AstroTurf Fields. We have 3 schools that have AstroTurf Fields, and they have debt to the district. And the reason I'm bringing this one up is because I had staff research what does it cost us to maintain a typical football field. At the other, we have 16 high schools, so at the other 13 high schools, what are we spending on average to maintain those football fields? And the answer came back about $19,000 a year to maintain each of those football fields. The schools that are in debt to the district on AstroTurf pay us somewhere, I believe, between $14,000 and $18,000 a year on their debt. It just doesn't seem fair and equitable to me that we're spending $19,000 at each of the 13 schools, and we're saving $19,000 at each of those 3 schools, yet asking them to pay their debt. I think in all fairness, we should give them same due consideration and wipe out the remainder of those debts based on the fact we have no maintenance cost at those fields. There was another point I was going to make about that, but anyways, we should. The other point is that when these agreements were made, this district had a concept of what was called equalization funding. Equalization funding basically meant that we would guarantee each high school approximately, Mrs. Neese, remind me, I think it was about $70,000 a year. We would guarantee they would have at least $70,000 a year to run their sports programs. If the school raised, through fundraisers and gate receipts, $40,000, we would give them 30. If they raised 60, we would give them 10. If they raised 75, we wouldn't give them anything. But that assured the ability that all schools can provide equal sports opportunities to all students at all the high schools, irregardless of where they're located. So you have a school like, let's say like Heritage High School, that is so far off the beaten path. There are not a lot of business partners out in that area. They don't have a lot of people attending their events and paying for tickets, so their gate receipts are very low and they're more challenged. But nevertheless, the agreement on our side has changed a little bit, and I don't feel it's fair to all concerned. Also, we've been dinged by the Attorney General in our audits for even having debts to school. It's technically a no-no to do what we did. I don't know if it was a no-no back then, but it's sure shunned upon right now, and I'd like to analyze all school debts. But this one is just an easy one to have a conversation on because of fairness across 16 high schools. I personally would like staff to bring us an item to eliminate those debts. And we do have staff prepared to speak to us on the schools or the amounts and answer questions, but I'd like to get other board members' input on this topic. Mrs. Nisi, go ahead.
Is one of them Palm Bay High School? Well, I was part of, like I said, God, I've been around here far too long. I was a part of that particular process when we brought that in. That field, because it was landlocked, was so bad. I know we couldn't find, John Thomas was here and Dr. Tom McIntyre. We came up with a way of structuring that was supposed to be a part of that deal, that once all the sponsors and we reached a certain point, because I know I asked John about that at one point, why was he paying on the loan? Because I understood it that the district was going to, instead of paying for maintenance, that's what exactly was supposed to happen. Instead of paying for the maintenance of the field, the district was going to each year take off what was supposed to go for maintenance for that. So I was shocked to find out that he was paying off a loan, because my understanding when we had everybody around the table was that there wasn't even supposed to be loan payments. And so I know I looked through my folder of documents, he looked through his, and I know Dr. Mullins, I know you looked through yours, and I know you said you couldn't find anything. It was probably one of those we were all around the table and we had a conversation about it, but there was never supposed to be a loan payment from Palm Bay High School. So my recollection of that whole conversation was that Palm Bay High School was not to be making loan payments. It was supposed to be in lieu of maintenance of that facility. So how much, so they're paying like $14,000, $15,000 a year?
No, Palm Bay High School is paying $12,500. My records currently indicate there are only 2 high schools that are making payments for synthetic turf. That's Melbourne High School and Palm Bay High School. Palm Bay's payment is $12,500. Melbourne's is $18,000. In reviewing accounting's records, it indicated there were couple of times in the early years where conversation was had, but there was never any direction back to accounting to reduce it or change it. So we've continued collecting the payments, and they've continued making the payments.
See, this was during Dr. McIntyre's time. The reason we did this is there was not enough practice fields around, and so the wear and tear on the fields was such that the replacement, the putting all the lines out, there was, it was being used so much between PE and everything, it wasn't worth. We were spending more money on maintenance and upkeep that we found that we were better off just putting in the turf than all of that. And so we found we were better off putting in the AstroTurf and then just putting those fees. In fact, I remember the conversation, we said, why don't we just have the payment each year instead of having the maintenance, have that come out of what we're paying in maintenance, have off the Astro fee. So it was never supposed to be a loan payment, it was supposed to be a chargeback, I think was the conversation we had. It was supposed to be a chargeback each year in lieu of maintenance costs. It would be a chargeback. So I know this was a conversation with Dr. McIntyre. Dr. McIntyre passed away, what year?
2008.
I have a feeling it never got written up during that time, but that was for both of those schools. I recall that conversation is we didn't have land to expand for practice fields, so we said, let's invest in AstroTurf, and that way we can use these fields and not have the wear and tear. That's my memory of it.
Mrs. Belford?
Just so I can fully understand the issue here, so you said Palm Bay High School is paying $12,500 per year?
Correct. Their initial origination date of their loan was May 30th, 2006. It was for a 20-year term, $250,000, and their annual payment is $12,500. They've paid $87,500 to date.
Okay, and then Melbourne High School is $18,000 per year?
Yes, ma'am. Their origination date was June 30th, 2008. Also a 20-year term at $18,000. The original amount of the loan was $359,583. They've paid $126,000 to date.
And is there a standard amount that we are spending on our other 11 high schools, or so there are no other schools that have loans for this type situation?
Not
for
synthetic turf, no.
Okay, and is there an average amount that we're spending on our other schools for maintenance of fields?
Grass fields, I understand, cost around $19,000 annually to maintain.
And from a financial standpoint, I think you understand the direction of the conversation. From a financial standpoint, do you have concerns that you would like for the board to consider before we move forward with providing direction on this?
Well, at this point, one of the things we need to be aware of is AstroTurf will not last forever. So at some point, we'll have to make a decision there. And this is revenue coming into our district. So these monies are currently being spent on other things within the district. So if we forgive one because of the other, we're still going to have to expend out the money. But I do see the $19,000. The other thing I want to bring up, if I may, and this is the athletic equalization. And while we are not doing athletic equalization to the 70,000, bringing every school to the 70,000 because the money has just not been there in the last 5 years, we have since 2013-14 provided $200,000 across the board to the schools. Those payments have been, middle schools have received $800, high schools $11,800, with Edgewood and West Shore receiving $11,800, and the junior seniors $12,600. So we have, while not athletic equalization to keep everybody up to a certain dollar amount, we have been providing that the last 3 years in a row, provided funds to the schools to assist them.
Which, two comments about that. One of which is, okay, so that's an equal distribution, so things are still unequal. The other one is I don't recall us approving that distribution as a athletic or support for athletics, or so I'm still curious how that came about, where that came in the budget.
Well,
but that's a separate conversation. We wouldn't really need an answer on that now. But that was news to me. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but that was news to me. So I don't know how that came about. I would like to move forward with looking at, go ahead.
Can you explain the relationship with Florida Tech now that they are really partners in that stadium? Where is that revenue going?
I cannot say. I'm not aware of that situation. I haven't looked into it. Ms. Irwin is, though.
So if you recall, we have a 3-year permanent contract with them with an extension option for 2 more years beyond that. They're paying $20,000 a year. Palm Bay gets half of that money per year, and then 20% stays in the district, and the rest is sent out to, it's equalized across the rest of the athletic programs. And the purpose of that is it's very difficult for us to find. Palm Bay High School just was a unique opportunity to do a stadium naming. The other school, many of Heritage in particular, is one we probably would never be able to get a stadium naming contract for. And so that was all decided before we actually signed the contract and agreed upon it.
So I get that.
Oh.
You may not have the answer, but what does it cost us to allow them to use that facility, meaning from a wear and tear standpoint? Obviously, as we know, there comes a point where you have to repair stuff. Because it's being used, obviously it's going to be at a faster pace. Do we take that into account?
There's a separate use agreement as well. I was looking for Mr. Langdorf to see, but he's not right here right now. He's the one who negotiated that. I want to add also that Palm FIT did do some upgrades for us there. They put a nice big P in the middle. They paid for that and all the other signage. So those were pluses for us.
Well, I think it's great. I just want to make sure that that's part of the discussion. The information you bring forward, I think, has to include that because other people are using it, and we're
More wear and tear.
More wear and tear, and we're getting
They do have a
revenue.
facilities use agreement as well, on top of the ads.
On the wear and tear for the AstroTurf, my office did speak with the schools, and it's roughly $4,500 a year. That's paid out of the internal school accounts to maintain the field annually. That would be to repair any tears or worn spots or anything else that has to be done with it.
That's interesting. So that's being paid by school internal accounts to maintain the field, and we're not paying for it, yet we're paying for it for the other fields. I think that's even more lopsided. That's going the wrong way as far as fairness and equality between the schools. I would like staff to double check. I thought, Mr. Theodore, that we spoke about 3 schools. Maybe I was mistaken. It was probably about a year ago. But the other question, I know the other question was, is the revenue from that, you implied is being utilized. My understanding that that was just falling to the bottom line, that it wasn't necessarily being allocated in somebody else's budget. It's just falling to the bottom line, and of course we would use bottom line money at the end of the year for something.
That's
It's not going to impact anybody's projected budget at this point in time.
No, it would not impact projected budgets. At this time, it does fall to the bottom line and get reappropriated.
Okay, thank you. That's very important.
Well, and the other comment is, with other high schools, we purchased and built additional fields and additional practice fields. And so the additional investment in these 2 schools would be because in lieu in other schools, we were able to, there was other land to build out on. And so, it's not like we're giving these schools, yes, these schools have AstroTurf, but it would be in lieu of additional fields that we were able to put in other places. And so I do think it's fair to do this. And until recently, when John Thomas brought it to my attention, and I was not aware of Mel High until recently, I was not aware they were making loan payments, and it's really been an unfairness situation. So I believe we should move forward and take these loan payments away, because it's really an equity issue.
Is that the consensus? Agreed. Okay, well, then what I would request of staff right now is to Go ahead. Before I give direction, I'll always value your input, Dr. Blackburn.
So we looked at this. The inequities are pretty gross. Immediate correction minus looking at several other factors could compound the inequities across the district. So I would ask the board to give staff and I an opportunity to look at all relative factors prior to bringing it. It isn't as easy as just forgiving. I wish it was that easy, but just forgiving the loans of 2 or 3 schools. I think there are more factors involved, and give us an opportunity to do a pretty in-depth analysis and then bring back a recommendation.
Actually, it is kind of that easy, but I agree we should consider everything. And so what I was going to suggest is that because the payments are due in June, is that we ask the schools to hold off on the payments until we resolve this, because I believe you'll research that within the next 30 days or so and bring something back to us. I just assume they don't make the payment until we make this decision. The next round of conversation is going to be analyzing, because I believe there are other debts that schools have to the district, and analyzing why they have them, and are they appropriate, and what should we do with them. This one was easy because there's a equality of maintenance fees across all fields. So I made this conversation a little easier. The other ones I think will be a little more complicated. But right now, let's ask the schools to hold off. Go ahead and do your additional due diligence and bring us back a recommendation. I suggest you discuss it with us before bringing it back. Okay. If there's no further discussion on that point, next would be board member reports. I'm willing to bet there aren't any. Any board member reports? Well, as you said, you are old, and so I am too. Any board member reports? No. Mr. Craig, feel free.
But the only thing I will say is, Mr. Ziegler and I both attended. We were fortunate enough, and the only reason I bring this up is you know, we have some amazing community partners here in Brevard, and one is the Brevard Zoo. And a week and a half ago, we were fortunate enough to attend, actually I spent a couple days with her, Temple Grandin, Dr. Temple Grandin, who is a leader in animal care, PhDs, you name it, on the autism spectrum, in her late 60s. But her first thing, as I talked to her, told her about our schools. She was very interested in our school programs and how we related to children in the ESE world, in the autism spectrum, and what we did. Her first question was, you know, what is your CTE programs? What CTE programs do you have that encourage children on a spectrum to get involved and find their passion? And that really resonated with me, because that's something obviously I'm passionate about, but it also kind of puts the stake in the ground of how we ensure that we are encouraging. And we had that discussion a little bit today at today's board meeting about, or workshop, about creating the correct programs. But it's correct programs that sometimes just inspire a passion and inspire a reason for somebody to break out of their shell and find that activity or that thing that's going to take them further in life. So as we move forward, you know, the zoo's got some programs that they're starting up. That's great. I would love to see us continue to partner with things like the zoo, with the Scott Center, with the variety of resources that we have in this community to ensure that we answer those questions, and that we find the programs that encourage all students to find their passion. That's about all I have to say.
Excellent point. I was going to elaborate a little more and thank the zoo and their executive director, Keith Winston, for doing this. Last year at Safari Under the Stars, I said to him, I said, you know, you do a tremendous amount for students and for education in this community, and I don't think anybody realizes how extensive that is, and you need to bring that to the forefront at this fundraiser. And this year they did. They not only brought it to the forefront of this fundraiser, they raised money for a project at the zoo for our students with disabilities, and that's just, I think that was just amazing. So thank you to the zoo for the partnership. Thank you for remembering, that was huge. Go ahead, Mrs. Nisa.
Dr. Blackburn, I don't know if you or one of your staff, I noticed when I was checking my email this afternoon, somewhere on some news program has put out to our community, because I know John was getting a couple emails on this too, somebody out there has put out a rumor, myth, or legend that we're no longer teaching cursive, because I've received phone calls and emails this afternoon on that. I'm noticing other board members are nodding on that. So we will need an email from staff, from somebody. I was trying to get a hold of Lynn, but somebody is generating to our parents out there that we no longer teach cursive. Oh, do you want to respond to, I see. Come on down, Jane. I didn't want to put anybody on the spot, but somebody out there is telling people that we no longer teach cursive. So we'll need a response that.
I will tell you that currently we have sessions for teachers planned for all summer for workshops on how to teach Danielian handwriting. We're having sessions for every grade level. Last I checked, we're about halfway full on each one, so it is alive and well. And earlier this year, you approved the purchase of the new borders for every classroom. That's right. So we are Danielian alive and well with cursive handwriting.
Could you? Yeah.
Myth dispelled, yeah.
So can a staff member tomorrow, sometime, obviously not tonight?
Oh, why not?
Send us an email outlining.
I will get with Dr. Spadaccini as she's directing that, and I will have a message out.
It doesn't need to be extensive, just.
Something short, because I just checked my email again, and I've got all these panics, emails saying, how can we help band together to get Brevard to start teaching cursive again? And we're teaching it, I promise you. So if we can have an email that indicates we have been, always have been, and will continue to teach cursive.
Absolutely, I will get with Dr. Spadaccini in the morning.
Mrs. Belford?
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Just one quick question, I promise, and that is, was there a gap in our teaching of cursive or Danielian or anything similar? So is it plausible that we would have a 5th grader that didn't learn how to write in cursive because we skipped a year or two when they would have been taught that skill?
I am not certain. I will tell you, when I was a building level principal, we encouraged cursive handwriting in every grade level. So that model has not changed for many years, but I will double check with Dr. Spadaccini on that as well.
Thank you. Dr. Blackburn, you're on.
As an aside, I will tell you, in a district not in Brevard, I have a sophomore at home and a 7th grader at home, and they look at cursive like a foreign language. So there was, it's been a national kind of debate, conversation on to write cursive or not to write cursive. My kids don't know how to write cursive. Yeah. Shame, bad father. Superintendent's report?
Yes, sir.
First thing I want to say sincerely to the board, thank you. The work that went in, hours and hours and hours of work that the board and senior staff put into the strategic plan that we moved forward today, and the organizational structure. And so just a sincere message of appreciation to all the hard work that went into that, the collaborative hard work that went into that with the board, senior staff, the rest of the organization. A lot of messages from this morning, but I just want to assure the board that we'll definitely prioritize including all voices that work for this system and voices in the community as we go forward. That was a huge message. And then the other message, and Mrs. Henderson reiterated it here this evening, around communications, right? We'll definitely make sure that we communicate effectively. Staff discussed that, pending approval on May 10th, that there are some movements or some changes that could happen as early as May 11th. and there's some changes because of the complexities that we wouldn't be ready to roll forward on even July 1 or July 2nd. So we'll continue, to communicate with the board on all of those transitions, and so just saying thank you. And the second point was around the EDR update that came at our joint audit committee meeting. I think I have a comment that could save us time. During that meeting, the recommendation, one of the recommendations was around a project manager, and I had some opposing views on the project manager. Well, in reading the report from the auditor in greater detail, the recommendation is, and if you indulge me for a moment, I'll read this sentence. A district project manager with the appropriate expertise should be assigned to the work with the vendor counterpart as well as the project team to make certain that the project is managed according to the plan, budget, and contract when the updated addendum negotiations have completed. I agree with that. I didn't realize that originally, but upon making final the addendum, absolutely, Gino and I have discussed, absolutely that is the appropriate time for a project manager. So if that pleases the concern of the board, then I think we're on the same page.
I agreed. Technically, that would have happened when we negotiated the contract back in 2013, and we didn't do it, which is where we really stubbed our toe, because we need that expertise to guide the successful project. I'm hoping that point where we finalize the contract's not too far down the road, because by not having that expert guidance, we're wasting time on a project that I'm sure we're going to be moving forward with, because I don't think we're going to just dismiss what's already been invested in time and money.
It was, as we all can agree, it was certainly a void years ago when this launched. One could argue that back in July of 2015, perhaps a project manager could have been brought on then, but there was so much going on right then. We put a cease and desist appropriately so on spending additional resources. At this time, where we are right now, short of the final addendum, there's not much, I'll put it, there isn't a project for a project manager to oversee because we don't have a final addendum.
Any thoughts?
What is the timeline, do you see, of making that decision of cut bait or go with an addendum?
So that brings me to, page 5 of the audit report. The delivery/acceptance schedule has been changed significantly from what we heard July 21st. It's been altered now twice, and we don't have a final one. I don't know.
My understanding on that is not only has the timeline changed, but we also have lost elements that were initially part of the package, if you will, that are no longer on that timeline. They have now been removed. In essence, we're getting less than we originally thought that we were getting. If my discussion with the auditors, I understood correctly. And while Mr. Budo is coming up, I just wanted to shout out to my team members for keeping me at the Joint Audit Committee meeting in spirit. Since I couldn't be there in person, I did get an opportunity to go back and watch the video, and certainly appreciated you being my voice for me without me being there. Mr. Budo.
Without jeopardizing some of the language in the negotiations, first let me address the timeline. We feel that we're weeks from having enough substance for you to review. I'm not saying that within weeks we'll have what would be the best that we would want, but given the leverage that we can use, it'll at least be what we can then sit down and make that decision about the fishing or cutting bait. And that's a relatively new
term or new use for that term, because being a nautical person I am and a fisherman that I am, the original use of that term that I'm aware of was actually meant more along the lines of the team spirit, that it didn't matter whether you were cutting bait or you were fishing, it was all just as important.
It's very true.
Just as important to do.
It's the alligator closest to the canoe.
Right. So, so I think that, you know, both are in play. We absolutely are very close to that fork in the road where we're going to have to make that decision of, you know, either we're going to move forward or not. And in the meantime, the old use of that term has been in play. We have absolutely been working as a team. The vendor has been working throughout this time in a variety of ways, fixing the problems on the old system that we already installed, developing the modules that we haven't installed yet on the HR side. And the addendum has some changes proposed to it. There are some things that were removed, but I will say that it was at our, we are agreeing to include those removals for you to consider, because there are some other things that are being added that we feel 3 years down the road are of more value to us, I guess is the best way I can say. So I certainly don't want to send a message that we are giving up anything in the net for that.
I guess the question I have, Dr. Blackburn, is don't we need a consultant on our team to represent our best interest? Nothing personal, but do we have the expertise on our team that understands this product? Harris is looking out for Harris's best interest. I know we have the legal representation, but do we have the IT expertise, someone that understands everything we need to know enough on whether to go fishing or cut bait?
I will stand here and say that, yes, in terms of the functionality and the rules that we'll put in place in terms of making a decision that it is accepted to our needs, yes, we do, with one caveat. We are still working off of the original contract, and this is not a rewrite of a contract. We're not starting from scratch, because that would mean a complete different pricing model. And that was something that Harris very diplomatically warned against, and is something that legal and audit said, yep, you want to go the addendum route because, and this all hinges on the original bad contract that we don't have as strong of a leg to stand on as we would from the start.
But I meant in terms of the product and making sure they understand the product, and I'm not an IT person.
Let me help you out. I know where you're going with that. And to have somebody that has experience in ERP implementation and or development over the course of the lifetime, the future foreseeable lifetime, which could be years, of this project, to be able to guide the initial steps. Very valid point. I made that point back last year. However, if we're just weeks or a month from settling the language in the contract, it's kind of mute, because they're not going to do anything for us coming on board. It would take us that long to get them on board, and then they have to get up to speed. So while it's a very valid point, if we would have done that a year ago, at this point, I don't think it's as valid prior to completing the addendum.
100%. And if you look at I think it was the last or second to last page in RSM's report, they had a very clean outline of how the project, the methodology should be, from gathering requirements to negotiating everything. And that would have been an absolute key component of doing that. That would be the future, how these would always be done. In addition with a lot of other things that would have been done different, certainly.
I guess we're all on the same page going forward, and it sounds optimistic, but we'll sit on pins and needles in the meantime. Okay. Dr. Blackburn, any other reports on your side of the table there?
No, sir.
Anybody else have anything to add for the good of the meeting? Everybody can go home except Mrs. Nisi. Meeting adjourned.